Chris Benoit, born May 21, 1967, in Montreal, Canada, is a devoted family man. However, to the wrestling world, he was a formidable competitor and one of the sport's biggest stars. At 40 years old, he was actively involved in numerous matches. Known as the Rabid Wolverine, he particularly enjoyed a strong following in Canada, where he seemed to balance his intense wrestling persona with that of an ideal father. Wrestling legend Chris Jericho remarked, "Chris was always a great father and very focused on his family." Chris's life was demanding. Wrestling careers tend to be shorter than in many other professions, largely due to the dangers associated with the sport. Although the matches are scripted, the physical impact is huge. However, Chris and others try to fit in as many matches as possible during their short careers. He was constantly on the move, going from one wrestling event to another, and no matter the distance, he was always there to perform. This backdrop made the events of June 23, 2007, even more shocking. In the days leading up to the tragedy, Chris's behavior raised concern among his friends and family. Although he was accustomed to a demanding schedule with World Wrestling Entertainment, something seemed to have changed during those days. On June 22, 2007, he was scheduled to fly to a event in Houston, Texas, but he missed his flight, which was highly unusual for him. Chavo Guerrero, a close friend and fellow wrestler, was the first to sense that something was wrong. When Chavo finally contacted Chris, his voice sounded strange and disconnected. During their conversation, Chris expressed his affection for Chavo in an unusual way, raising concerns. He explained that his wife, Nancy, had been vomiting blood and their son, Daniel, was also seriously ill. This situation was worrying and seemed like a plausible reason for his absence. Chavo believed it was likely a temporary issue and hoped to reconnect with Chris when they met in Houston. However, the next day, Chris's behavior became even more alarming. He left a series of strange voicemails for Chavo, apologizing for missing the show and promising to catch the next flight to Houston. But the voicemails didn't sound like Chris, his tone was off, and he spoke in a somewhat erratic manner. He claimed he would arrive in Houston by 8 a.m., which didn't align with the timing needed for his flight. What had begun as a simple family emergency was quickly escalating into something concerning, prompting worries among others in the community that something terrible might happen. Chris also mentioned missing his flight and being late to the event in Beaumont, Texas, which was out of character for him, as he was known for always being punctual. He sounded tired and groggy and ended his message with an "I love you," which was not something Chris typically said to a colleague. This raised alarm bells. Initially, Chavo tried to dismiss it, thinking Chris was just overwhelmed with his family's health issues and the care they required, but he still felt that something was off. Just 12 minutes after receiving a voicemail, Chavo called Chris back but received no answer. He left a message asking Chris to return his call as soon as possible. At 3:44 p.m., Chris called back and explained that he missed Chavo's initial call because he was rescheduling his flight. Chavo felt uneasy and asked if something else was wrong. Chris dismissed his concerns, stating that he had a very stressful day and was worn out from his family's sudden illness. Chavo, however, doesn't believe Chris because he knows Chris enough to suspect that there's more to the story than meets the eye. He chose not to press further and suggested that they talk later after the fight, ending the call. At 3:51 a.m. on Sunday, June 24th, Chavo and their mutual friend, Scott Armstrong, received strange texts from Chris. One message included the address of Chris's family home, while another mentioned that his dogs were safely secured near the pool and that the garage door was still open. Although the text seemed odd, it was early in the morning, so they overlooked them, assuming Chris had made a mistake. A few hours later, Chavo was at Houston Airport waiting for Chris to arrive. On Monday, June 25, 2007, as WWE prepared for Raw in Corpus Christi, WWE Vice President of Talent Relations John Laurinaitis, aka Johnny Ace, reviewed the messages Scott and Chavo received from Chris early Sunday morning. The messages suggested that something was seriously wrong. After several hours without Chris showing up, WWE officials decided to call Fayetteville police for a welfare check on Chris and his family. By 4:15 p.m., they received alarming news. 3 bodies had been discovered in Chris's home, leading authorities to declare the scene a major crime scene. The bodies of Chris, his wife Nancy, and their son Daniel were discovered in various areas of the house, marking a tragic and horrific incident. On Friday, June 22, 2007, Chris killed his wife, Nancy, in the bonus room of their home in Fayetteville. Police later revealed that before her death, Nancy's arms had been tied with coaxial cables, and her feet were secured with duct tape. In the kitchen, they discovered a balled-up tube sock and tape that had dried blood on it, which authorities believed was used as a makeshift gag before her murder. Her body was found wrapped in a blanket next to a Bible. Evidence indicated that Chris had pressed his knee into her back while strangling her with a cord around her neck. There were no signs of a struggle prior to Nancy's death. Toxicology reports showed alcohol in her system, but it was unclear if she had consumed it before her death or if it was a result of decomposition. The condition of her body also complicated the determination of hydrocodone and alprazolam levels, raising the question of whether she had been sedated, similar to their son, Daniel, who was killed the next day, June 23, 2007. Daniel was Chris's 3rd child and only son with Nancy. He was found suffocated, with another Bible next to him. Although there were no visible bruises, internal injuries to his throat confirmed the cause of death. Reports indicated that Daniel had been sedated with Xanax and was unconscious when he died. His body was decomposing, but not as severely as his mother's. Just hours before Chris ended his life on June 24, 2007, his internet searches raised serious concerns about his intentions. These searches indicate that he was not in a state of confusion but was preparing for something sinister. The last known photograph of Chris, taken on June 22, 2007, shows him at Dr. Phil Aston's office, just before the tragedy that would follow. Investigations later uncovered that Chris had searched for methods to break a neck, a troubling detail revealed by his former fiancée in a podcast in 2016. However, the Fayetteville County Sheriff's Office did not verify these specific searches, and Chris's autopsy showed no neck injuries. Additionally, there was a note, a final message found in a Bible next to the bodies of his wife and son, which simply stated that he was preparing to leave this earth. No one knew exactly what this meant, but it seemed like a final farewell, perhaps even a confession, as if Chris was trying to understand the actions he had just taken. The note was later sent to his first wife, Martina, and their 2 children in Canada. Chris's father, Michael, verified its existence, indicating that the tragedy might have been premeditated rather than a spontaneous act. The Bibles beside Nancy and Daniel added to the ominous atmosphere of the scene. Some interpreted the note as a sign of guilt, while others viewed it as Chris finally facing the reality of his actions. In his last days, Chris's life was plagued by darkness. Years of head injuries from wrestling had severely affected his brain, and the emotional burden of losing his close friend Eddie Guerrero plunged him deeper into despair. His mental health deteriorated, and the combination of physical and emotional challenges ultimately led to one of the most tragic events in wrestling history. He was found in his home gym, hanging from a pulley system with a towel around his neck. No one could have anticipated this outcome, especially following the horrific acts committed against his family. Toxicology reports on Chris revealed unusually high testosterone levels, suggesting steroid use. Additionally, traces of Xanax and hydrocodone were found, raising further questions about his state of mind. Was he under the influence when he killed Nancy and Daniel? While it's uncertain, it's clear that his mental health was unstable in his final days. Analyzing the crime scene, autopsies, and toxicology results indicates that this was a calculated crime. Chris spent days methodically killing his wife, his son, and ultimately himself. Steroids were discovered in Chris's home, hinting that roid rage may have influenced his actions. Some medical professionals link steroid use to significant anger issues and psychological problems like paranoia. Investigators noted a substantial time gap between Nancy's death and that of their son Daniel, suggesting that the murders were premeditated rather than impulsive. Prosecutors in New York began investigating Chris's orders from Signature Pharmacy and MedXLife.com, both of which sold steroids and HGH online. Terrence Kindlon, the lawyer for MedX Life co-owner Gary Brandwine, denied the claims that his client provided steroids to Chris. According to Sports Illustrated, Chris received 3 shipments from Signature Pharmacy, the first in December 2005 at a Texas address, the second in February 2006 in Peachtree City, Georgia, and the third in July 2006 in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. This investigation was part of a larger probe into steroid use among wrestlers, which implicated several individuals, including Kurt Angle, Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, Edge, and Gregory Helms. Following the tragic deaths of the Chris family, there was a demand for answers, but each inquiry uncovered more questions. By the time authorities found the bodies of Nancy, Daniel, and Chris on June 25, 2007, some aspects of the case began to connect, but the overall picture remained unclear. The investigation was relatively simple. Chris killed his wife and son before ending his own life. However, something felt wrong about the scene. There were no signs of forced entry or struggle, making it disturbingly calm. Nancy's hands and feet were tied, and a Bible was found next to both her and Daniel. Was this indicative of Chris's mental breakdown, or was he trying to justify his actions in some twisted way? The toxicology report indicated high testosterone levels, confirming long-term steroid use, but it wasn't just the drugs at play. Chris's autopsy showed early signs of dementia and chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, indicating brain damage from years of head injuries. CTE affects behavior, causes mood swings, and can lead to aggression. Could this have been the crucial factor? Eddie, Chris's best friend, passed away 2 years prior, and many believe this loss significantly affected Chris. Eddie's death deeply impacted Chris, leading those close to him to report that he began to spiral downward. He became increasingly withdrawn and distant, showing signs of mental struggle. The combined emotional toll of losing a close friend and the physical repercussions of years in wrestling created immense pressure on him. This burden, along with other personal issues, likely contributed to his mental and emotional decline. Neuroscientist and former wrestler Christopher Nowinski suggests that Chris suffered from too many untreated concussions, which could have gradually harmed his mental well-being. Christopher noted that Chris was one of the few wrestlers who intentionally took chair shots to the back of his head, a reckless decision. After examining Chris's brain, Dr. Julian Bales, a neurosurgery expert at West Virginia University, found that Chris's brain showed such significant damage that it resembled that of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient. Additional tests confirmed that Chris had severe chronic traumatic encephalopathy, a condition that can lead to serious behavioral problems. Chris's father later suggested that brain damage could be the main reason behind the tragic murder, but WWE dismissed this idea as mere speculation. In May 2003, Nancy filed for divorce, citing abuse from Chris, but she withdrew the filing 3 months later. In 2008, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported that Nancy might have suspected Chris of having an affair with a female WWE wrestler. There were also reports that they fought over a life insurance policy, based on information from the Fayette County Sheriff's Office. The reasons behind the Chris family tragedy are complex, and multiple theories have emerged to explain how things went so wrong. WWE Chairman Vince McMahon commented on the incident, suggesting that it stemmed from mental health issues combined with the physical toll of Chris's wrestling career. Vince believes that Chris's actions were not solely due to steroids, rather, they were influenced by the physical damage to his body and the emotional stress he was experiencing. While Vince's comments sparked debate, they highlight the significant effects wrestling can have on an individual's mental and physical well-being. It was evident that Chris was in distress, and this tragedy likely resulted from years of accumulated physical and emotional stress. An unusual detail emerged when a statement about Nancy's death was added to Chris Benoit's Wikipedia page just 14 hours before police found the bodies of Chris and his family. The update mentioned that Chris was replaced by Johnny Nitro for the ECW World Championship match at Vengeance because he was not there due to personal issues stemming from the death of his wife, Nancy. Wikinews noticed this update, which was later reported by Fox News. The edit took place at 4 a.m. on June 25, nearly 10.5 hours before the bodies were discovered at 2:30 p.m. that same day. Compounding the mystery, the IP address of the editor was traced back to Stamford, Connecticut, which was then the headquarters of WWE. When this early report reached the media, the anonymous editor claimed it was merely a coincidence. But was it really? Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case. The case of Bruno Fernandes. Eliza Samudio was born on February 22, 1985, near Brazil's capital. Her father, Luis Carlos Samudio, was an architect, while her mother, Sonia Fatima Silva, worked on a farm. Their marriage was short-lived and unhappy, leading to a divorce when Eliza was just 6 months old. Luis was abusive toward Sonia, putting her life at risk multiple times. After the divorce, he refused to allow Sonia to keep Eliza, threatening her safety. Consequently, Sonia had to leave home without her daughter. She opened a small farm and met a man with whom she later had a son. Now, Sonia rarely saw her daughter. When Eliza turned 10, Sonia gathered her courage and took the girl away from Luis. They quickly bonded with Sonia's son and enjoyed a peaceful life together for a year. However, Luis returned to reclaim Eliza, using threats of violence to force her back. Eliza was unhappy living with her father, who was cruel to her. As a teenager, he exploited her by making her entertain his friends for money. When she turned 18, Eliza decided to leave her father and move to Sao Paulo. Her biggest dreams were to become a model and marry a football player. Since childhood, she adored this sport and dreamed of starting a family with a professional player. When Eliza arrived in Sao Paulo, she had little money and no connections. She aimed to work as a model and build a successful career. However, things did not go as she had hoped. She was not accepted for any modeling jobs. To survive and earn some money, she resorted to selling herself. During this time, she also appeared in several adult films while searching for modeling opportunities. Her photos were published in Brazilian magazines. Through her connections in the modeling industry, she attended football events where she met several famous players, including Bruno Fernandes, a goalkeeper born in 1984. Mutual friends claimed they met in 2008 at a barbecue in Rio de Janeiro, but later, Bruno changed the story, saying they actually met at an adult party organized by a friend. Eliza becomes Bruno's mistress. Although he is married and in a relationship with another woman, he plays for the famous Brazilian football team Flamengo. Bruno was not seeking a serious relationship since he was married and wanted to maintain his reputation. However, through mutual friends, he promised Eliza that he would divorce his wife for her. Bruno often spent the night at Eliza's house, and they enjoyed time together away from the media to avoid any complications. Their relationship lasted a few months until Eliza revealed that she was pregnant. They both recalled that unfortunate night when Bruno's protection failed. Bruno reacted poorly to the news, viewing Eliza as just a passing distraction. He pressured Eliza to abort the pregnancy, and even bribed people to gain her trust and influence her decision to terminate the pregnancy. Despite this, Eliza was determined to keep the child and become a mother. This conflict led to numerous scandals, and their relationship quickly fell apart. In October of that year, Eliza filed a police report about an attempted kidnapping and stalking. She gained public attention and was featured on Brazilian television as Bruno's secret pregnant mistress. Additionally, she described Bruno as a very cruel person whom she feared, and this information was included in her police report. Eliza expressed concern that Bruno might try to induce a miscarriage by secretly adding medication to her food. Unfortunately, the court did not thoroughly investigate her claims, and by the end of the trial, Bruno was only issued a restraining order that required him to stay at least 300 meters away from Eliza. Although she sought further protection, The judge deemed it unnecessary since their relationship was unofficial and not taken into account in the ruling. Eliza asked Bruno for financial support to cover their child's medical expenses and to provide better nutrition. Bruno, however, refused, claiming that the child might not be his but could belong to another man because Eliza had lived a promiscuous life. Eliza insisted that she had not been with anyone else since meeting Bruno. Despite her claims, Bruno denied being the child's father. In 2010, a boy was born in a hospital in Sao Paulo, and although Bruno paid all the medical bills, he wanted no involvement with the baby. He did not meet the child until the boy was 4 months old. Eliza wanted the baby to have his father's last name and suggested that Bruno confirm paternity through a DNA test. Bruno agreed. According to her messages, Bruno had agreed to accept his role as the child's father and provide financial support. He also offered to move into a new apartment that he would pay for himself. Since Bruno was willing to cooperate, Eliza wanted to drop her claims for paternity and child support, which she had not yet officially filed. However, on June 5, 2010, Sonia and Eliza's friends become worried when they cannot contact Eliza, which her mother found unusual, especially since Eliza had not mentioned the child. The police began searching for Eliza, and news of her disappearance quickly spread to the media. Consequently, Bruno was questioned. He claimed to know Eliza but insisted he was not the father of her child, stating that it was just a brief relationship. Although the police had no evidence linking Bruno to Eliza's disappearance, many people suspected he knew more than he was letting on. On June 24, a key lead emerged when an anonymous caller informed the police that Eliza had been murdered, her clothes burned, and her body concealed on Bruno's property. However, the police struggled to secure a search warrant for Bruno's farm or home. The judge required more substantial evidence, particularly because Bruno was a prominent figure in Brazil. To protect their credibility in case he turned out to be innocent, the police proceeded with caution to avoid provoking public outrage. They placed a surveillance device in Bruno's house on June 26, 2010. Just 2 days after the wiretap was installed, Eliza's son was found in a slum in Ribeirão das Neves. Diane de Souza, Bruno's wife, is suspected of having abandoned the boy there. The police decided to interrogate Bruno and his wife, but the session yielded no useful information as they were supported by a team of lawyers. On June 28, after the police questioned Diane and Bruno, who refused to comment, a judge authorized a search of one of Bruno's homes. During the search, police found women's clothing and diapers in the house and in Bruno's Range Rover, where they also discovered blood traces that matched Eliza's DNA. Additionally, they found Eliza's sunglasses and black high-heeled shoes, which her friends quickly identified. Although the police collected substantial evidence linking Bruno to Eliza's disappearance, the judge deemed it insufficient, and the case did not advance. On July 6, another significant breakthrough occurred. Police arrested a 17-year-old named Sergio Rosa Sales, who was Bruno's cousin. Sergio shared a shocking story with the police, confessing that he was involved in Eliza's murder, which Bruno had orchestrated from beginning to end. Sergio claimed he was with Bruno's best friend and another man, a hitman, during the incident. According to him, Bruno wanted to eliminate Eliza because he felt she was putting too much pressure on him and feared she would leak damaging information to the press that could jeopardize his career. Sergio provided a detailed account of events, explaining that Bruno had invited Eliza to one of his homes to discuss financial matters regarding their child. Since Eliza had no transportation, Bruno arranged for his best friend, Luiz Henrique Romão, to drive her. However, Luiz's true intention was not to take her to meet Bruno, but rather to kidnap and kill her in order to avoid paying child support and to protect Bruno's reputation. In the car were Eliza, the child, Luiz, and Sergio, who was armed with a weapon. Sergio attacked Eliza, but she managed to knock the weapon away. Although he tried to shoot her, The weapon was unloaded because it was only meant to intimidate her. At that moment, Sergio hit her several times until she lost consciousness. They then took the child to Bruno's house, where he was waiting. Bruno instructed them to deal with her without leaving any evidence, specifically stating that they should not harm the child. Bruno then directed Luis and Sergio to another piece of land where a man named Marcos Aparecido dos Santos, a former police officer turned murderer, was waiting. Marcos specialized in disposing of bodies and was known for his ability to eliminate any evidence of his crimes. After giving these orders, Bruno flew to Rio de Janeiro. Eliza was taken to the location where Sergio was present with her. Meanwhile, Marcos spent a long time with Eliza, using harsh and brutal methods. It's unclear how many days she endured suffering before her death. According to Sergio, on June 8, Eliza was forced to call her friends and tell them that everything was fine with Bruno, who had acknowledged paternity and would meet her demands. She was also made to say that she was leaving the country, but none of her friends or family received such calls. Eliza's lawyer stated that her last communication with family or friends was on June 4. Additionally, one theory from the police suggests that Bruno was present that day and wanted to witness Eliza's death. Sergio reported that after enduring many hours of torture, Eliza began begging for her life, at which point Marcos strangled her with a tie. After that, Marcos dismembered Eliza's body and placed the pieces in a black bag, feeding the flesh to the dogs. And after the dogs started eating, he disposed of the rest of Eliza's body elsewhere. However, the police discovered inconsistencies in Sergio's story. He claimed that Eliza's remains were buried where Bruno had originally brought her, but the police found no bones at that location. It is possible that the men agreed to conceal the actual location of her remains. Following Sergio's confession, the judge approved the arrest of Bruno and the other individuals involved in the murder. On July 7, police visited Bruno's house but found he was not there. A few hours later, Bruno and Luis voluntarily went to the police station to surrender, acting on the advice of Bruno's lawyers, who believed it would be better for his public image. Bruno maintained his innocence and denied any involvement in the murder. At the moment of his arrest, Bruno was not removed from his football team until details were clarified. But since the case dragged on July 15, his contract was terminated. The trial of Bruno, a famous footballer, attracted significant attention. Details shared by Sergio made headlines in newspapers and magazines, and the Brazilian public closely followed the case on television. They wanted to know if the police would find Eliza's remains and whether the public's favorite footballer had really committed something so terrible. During the trial, Eliza's mother, Sonia, sought custody of Eliza's son. Initially, custody was awarded to Eliza's father, Luis Carlos Zamudio, as he was the last person with whom the child lived. However, Sonia quickly appealed to the court for custody of the child, wanting to ensure that her grandson did not grow up in the same terrible conditions she had experienced. The judge quickly removed guardianship from Luis Carlos due to his prior involvement in the molestation of a 10-year-old girl. As a result, the boy's grandmother, Sonia, became the official guardian. She then requested a paternity test, which revealed that Bruno Fernandes was the father of Eliza's son. Sergio was a crucial witness in the case. When he was 17, the judge ruled him innocent. However, in August 22, 2012, Sergio was found dead in an incident in the Minaslandia neighborhood of Belo Horizonte. According to police, Sergio was on his way to work when he was chased by two men on a motorbike. He tried to hide in a house, but was attacked 6 times. This meant that the police could no longer rely on their primary witness. 24 November 2012, Luis Henrique Ferreira Romao was sentenced to 15 years in prison for aggravated murder, and Fernanda Gomez de Castro, goalkeeper Bruno's ex-girlfriend, to 5 years for her part in the crime. On December 31, 2012, Bruno's contract with Flamengo officially ended. April 27, 2013, Marcos Aparecido dos Santos was sentenced to 22 years in prison. The sentence was 19 years in closed prison for murder and an additional 3 years in open prison for concealing a corpse. Bruno was sentenced to 22 years in prison, but he secured his release in 2017 after submitting another appeal. Just 4 days after his release, he joined a new football club called Bow Sport. He played his first match for the team on April 8, 2017, but the club lost all its sponsors due to his inclusion. On April 25, his appeal was overturned and he was ordered to serve his full sentence. Bruno and his lawyers argued that there was insufficient evidence to connect him to Eliza's disappearance. A new judge determined that blood traces found in Bruno's car were enough to keep him in prison. The judge also stated that if Bruno wanted a reduction in his sentence, he would need to reveal the location of Eliza's remains. Despite this, Bruno maintained his innocence. In 2019, his lawyer successfully arranged for him to enter a semi-open prison regime, allowing him to be out during the day and return at night. He later joined another football club, Pocos de Caldas, but after a few games, they terminated his contract due to his limited availability for training. Currently, Bruno is still in the semi-open regime and is searching for another football club that will accept him. The whereabouts of Eliza's remains are still unknown. Bruno continues to claim that he is innocent. He has divorced his wife and remarried dentist Ingrid Calheiros. His second wedding took place in prison. He leads a nearly normal life. He has a wife, spends considerable time outside of prison, and is able to work, while Sonia, the victim's mother, continues to search for her daughter's remains and raise her grandson. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Angela Allen. In early 2012, Angela Allen was a 16-year-old high school student living in Van Buren, Arkansas. She was known for her positive and kind nature and was very religious, attending church regularly. Angela had a passion for children and dreamed of pursuing a nursing career in the future, with the goal of working in a hospital. She also loved animals and was always optimistic about life. Angela grew up in a dysfunctional family. Her father was abusive to her mother, but fortunately, he did not harm the children. However, he abandoned his family and had no contact with Cecilia or his children. After he left, Cecilia became involved with another man, who turned out to be cruel. She endured years of abuse from him. Later, Cecilia became addicted to illegal drugs and alcohol, which eventually resulted in her losing custody of her children. Cecilia did not want her children to be placed in foster homes or boarding schools. Cecilia eventually agreed to let her mother adopt Angela and her brother. Although Cecilia visited them frequently, they were unable to develop a close relationship. Cecilia's mother was determined to provide her grandchildren with everything they needed. Although she was retired, she took on a part-time job to earn extra money. She raised the children in a loving environment, hoping they would receive a good education and become independent. Despite their efforts, finances were tight, and they had to save a lot. The children understood their situation, did not ask for much, and appreciated their grandmother's care. During her school years, Angela dreamed of having a computer and a mobile phone. She wanted to connect with friends on social networks and play games like other children her age. Angela often felt jealous of her friends who had these devices. However, she understood that her grandmother could not afford them, so she never pressured her to buy expensive things. Angela was usually modest, influenced by her strong religious beliefs. Nevertheless, every time she went to church, she prayed for a smartphone. Finally, her prayers were answered. On her 16th birthday, her grandmother saved enough money to buy her a modern mobile phone. Angela was so excited that she quickly created an account on social networks. Almost every day, she made new friends. However, this naive girl did not realize the potential dangers of sharing her phone number with strangers. Angela often received calls from unknown numbers, even late at night. This situation worried her brother, who was more aware of the potential dangers. He realized that Angela's naivety could put her in danger. One time, her brother answered a call from a stranger. The caller turned out to be a 30-year-old man to whom Angela had given her cell phone number via social media. Angela's brother threatened to report the man to the police if he did not stop contacting Angela. He reminded the caller that Angela was only 16, prompting the man to hang up. A stranger wanted to meet Angela, but it was clear that he had bad intentions. The situation worsened when Angela misrepresented her age on social media. In the photos, she looked older, which meant that the men did not realize they were talking to a minor. This led to a serious argument between Angela and her brother. Her brother then told their grandmother about the situation, and she spoke to Angela, explaining the potential dangers and the intentions of these strange men online. Angela began to understand the risks involved in her behavior and realized that it was not safe. She promised her grandmother that she would avoid such situations in the future. On the evening of February 10, 2012, Angela told her grandmother that she was going for a walk, which was her normal routine, as she usually liked to walk before going to bed. While her grandmother did the housework, Angela went for a walk. After a while, her grandmother fell asleep. When she woke up, she was shocked to see that Angela had not returned from her walk. She began to panic and went to the police to report Angela missing. She explained to the police that Angela had left the night before and had not returned home all night. The grandmother sensed that something was wrong because Angela had never been out this late before, and it was unusual for her to run away. They had not argued, and all of Angela's belongings were still at home. The police quickly arrived at Angela's grandmother's house, where they found her distressed and pleading for help in finding her granddaughter. She provided a photo and description of Angela, as well as details of what she was wearing when she left. Several patrol cars searched the area but found no trace of her. By this time, many neighbors had learned of the situation and joined in the search. Some spoke to the police to offer their assistance. Unfortunately, no one had seen Angela that night, so they were unable to provide any information about the direction she had gone. Angela's grandmother described her usual walking route, and the police checked several times but found no signs of an attack or any clues as to Angela's whereabouts. Days passed without any progress on the case. During this time, everyone in the area knew that Angela was missing. The local community grew increasingly concerned because there had been no ransom demands. She had not contacted anyone, and her social media accounts showed no activity. As the crucial 48 hours passed without any updates, the hope of finding Angela alive diminished. However, her grandmother remained hopeful until the very end. The FBI was brought in to assist in the search for Angela. Agents first focused on her social media accounts. They checked her cell phone and, surprisingly, over the weekend after her disappearance, Angela sent several text messages to family members, including her mother, brother, grandmother, and a friend. In these messages, she claimed to have a new boyfriend and said that she had left with him in a black Chevrolet Camaro to a nearby town about 2 hours away. She asked them not to bother her. The messages sent from Angela's phone raised suspicions. Her grandmother believed that the messages were written in a way that did not match Angela's usual writing style. She suggested that the messages may have been sent by someone else who was trying to distract the search. After sending those messages, Angela, who was usually very communicative, stopped responding to friends and family, which was completely out of character for her. FBI agents discovered hundreds of contacts, including Angela's relatives and friends. After reviewing the information, they noticed a man who had recently contacted Angela, which led to suspicions of his involvement in her disappearance. Lloyd Jones was brought in for questioning and was found to have a history of violence against women. During the investigation, FBI agents discovered numerous communications between Lloyd and Angela, indicating that he had been trying to convince her to meet for some time. Lloyd was considered strange, especially in his interactions with girls. In 2001, he was convicted of abuse after breaking into the home of a woman he had been stalking. He attacked her, threatened her life, and abused her before leaving the scene. The victim reported the incident to the police, resulting in Lloyd being sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was paroled after serving 7 years for good behavior. In February 2012, Angela, who had been communicating online with Lloyd for a long time, suddenly disappeared. The police suspected Lloyd of being involved in her case. Lloyd claimed to live in the same city as Angela. He said he was only 1 year older than she was and was studying at a nearby school. Their online friendship developed into a romantic relationship. He tricked Angela, gaining her trust to obtain intimate photos of her, but he didn't stop there. The day before Angela went missing, she received an invitation from Lloyd to meet on the evening of February 9, 2012. When Angela left home for a walk, she was dressed up and had put on makeup. She didn't tell her grandmother that she was meeting someone, but when she returned, she acted strangely. She seemed worried and was crying, but she didn't explain why. The following evening, Angela went missing. During questioning, Lloyd confessed that he had met Angela online, where they developed a friendship and eventually agreed to meet in person. He stated that she had claimed to be 19, which made him feel comfortable meeting her. On the night they met, he picked her up in his car near her grandmother's house. However, he began to suspect that she might be younger than she had said. After a brief conversation, Angela revealed that she was actually 16. This worried Lloyd, who feared that he might get into trouble with the law, so he asked Angela to get out of the car. They only drove a short distance before he dropped her off, and he did not wait for her to return home. He claimed that he never saw her again and insisted that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. It was clear that Lloyd was not telling the truth. Analysis of the text messages exchanged between Angela and Lloyd showed that she quickly admitted her true age of 16, and he did not dispute this. This meant that he knew her real age. When confronted with this contradiction, Lloyd began to avoid the question, claiming that he could not remember that part of their conversation. He suggested that he might have missed the text message. During questioning, he continued to adjust his story and eventually recalled that Angela had called her friend before leaving the car. He claimed that a few minutes later, a black Chevrolet Camaro pulled up and she got into it. This was the car mentioned in the text messages from Angela's phone. FBI agents and police were skeptical of Lloyd's claim. To determine whether he had indeed sent the messages on Angela's behalf, they needed to analyze their communications in more detail. Some parts of the conversation were redacted, but an agent was able to reconstruct the conversations. Police discovered a history of Lloyd's online activity that began long before Angela went missing. He targeted young girls, trying to lure them into meetings. He had attracted several victims. Police interviewed some of these girls, and one confirmed that she had met Lloyd online. They had been communicating as friends for a while, and he seemed nice to her. In reality, he had taken advantage of her loneliness as she was going through a breakup at the time. Unfortunately, she agreed to meet him, which led her to a warehouse where she was attacked. After the attack, Lloyd threatened her for a long time, using photos to intimidate her into silence and prevent her from contacting the police. The police do not believe that Angela went to see Lloyd willingly. Lloyd tricked Angela using a method he had successfully employed before. Evidence also indicated that he used some photos and attempted to arrange a meeting with her. After the first meeting, Angela did not want to continue the relationship. It was unlikely that she would have willingly gotten into his car. He probably knew that she had a habit of going for walks before bed and waited for her near her house. Lloyd's story kept changing. He began to provide new details about Angela and her friend. He claimed to have heard that Angela and her friend were planning to go to the Arkansas River. This information was verified, and he was found to be lying. The police went to Lloyd's house and, with his permission, searched the premises. They discovered that he lived there with his girlfriend, who insisted that she did not believe he had kidnapped Angela. She claimed that on the day Angela went missing, Lloyd was busy working in a warehouse near their home and had no time to go out of town. The police were particularly interested in the warehouse because he had attacked another victim there. Lloyd was reportedly laying floors on the day Angela went missing, and his girlfriend was convinced of his innocence because he came home covered in dirt and construction materials. The police requested items for forensic analysis, and Lloyd's girlfriend provided what they needed. They found traces of dirt on his pants and jacket, but his shoes were suspiciously clean, leading the police to believe he had changed them. After mapping the location of the warehouse, the police noted that it was also where Angela's cell phone had last been active. The police decided to search the warehouse, hoping this would help them find Angela. When the police and Lloyd's girlfriend arrived at the shed, they immediately noticed a disturbed area of land behind the building. The land belonged to Lloyd, but they needed official permission to conduct a thorough search. Lloyd initially agreed, but he later prohibited digging in that particular location. The police brought specially trained dogs with them, and one dog signaled near the disturbed area next to the shed, which was unusual. However, the police could not take further action without a warrant. Several police officers interviewed neighbors who may have seen something on the day Angela went missing or afterward. However, no one reported anything unusual. Some neighbors said Lloyd had been on the land for a long time, which was not unusual since he usually worked in his shed. The police then had to leave. Given the situation, it was important to act quickly before Lloyd could destroy any evidence. The police managed to obtain a warrant in a very short time. The next morning, the officers quickly returned to the scene with the necessary documents and specially trained dogs. They suspected that the Angela was no longer alive. The police focused on a specific area that had interested them the day before and began digging through half a meter of loose soil. Forensic experts discovered a metal plate, and the search dogs became excited as they approached a steel plate. Underneath it, they found a blue plastic barrel that had been buried and sealed. It appeared that the barrel had been placed there recently, as the soil above it was still fresh and loose. The police then dug up the plastic bin. Inside, they found a body. The body was in poor condition and was immediately taken to the forensic lab, where the victim was identified as Angela Allen. The forensic expert concluded that she had been abused and that the cause of death was strangulation. Her grandmother needed psychological support to cope with the tragic news, even though the body did not require identification. On the day of Angela Allen's funeral, 16-year-old Angela was buried in the city center, attended by hundreds of people. There was now an urgent need to bring the killer to justice. The suspect, identified as Lloyd, had buried Angela on his property. DNA evidence linked Lloyd to the crime, confirming that he had strangled Angela, as indicated by marks on her neck. Although some time had passed since the murder, the cold February temperatures and the burial helped preserve much of the evidence, including the DNA. During a visit to his father in prison, Lloyd confessed to the crime. This confession was recorded and added to the case file. Lloyd's girlfriend later told the police that when he returned home that night, his clothes and shoes were covered in dirt and blood. She didn't think much of it at the time, but he must have discarded them afterward. With the overwhelming evidence against him, Lloyd's attorney didn't even attempt to argue for his innocence. Instead, the defense focused on the idea of an unintentional crime. During the trial, Lloyd changed his testimony. He admitted that he went with Angela because she wanted to watch the sunset. When Angela revealed that she was only 16 years old, he became upset. In a fit of rage, he pushed her into the river. After a while, he realized that she was not coming up for air. When he pulled her out, he discovered that she had drowned. However, this was all a lie. The medical examiner confirmed that Angela had not drowned. There were clear signs of strangulation on her body, and there was no water in her lungs. It is unclear why he chose to fabricate such a false story. Nevertheless, this obvious deception only strengthened the jury's belief in Lloyd's guilt. The prosecutor presented their version of events during the trial. Angela and Lloyd's first meeting took place on February 9. Angela, a teenage girl, had dressed up for a date with someone her own age, but became frightened when she encountered an adult man instead. She refused to get in his car and go home with him, which upset her. Lloyd was determined not to give up. He tried to convince her to meet again. When his attempts failed, he resorted to threatening her by saying that he would share her private photos with all the students at the school. Terrified, Angela agreed to meet him, but this time, she would not survive. He attacked and abused her, then strangled her. The jury quickly returned a verdict. Lloyd Jones was sentenced to 60 years in prison for Angela Allen's death, without the possibility of parole. He was also sentenced to an additional 30 years, which included 10 years for desecration of a corpse and 20 years in prison for using inappropriate photos of minors. However, things changed. After serving just 4 years of his sentence, Lloyd escaped. At the time, Lloyd was incarcerated at a correctional facility in Brick, Arkansas. He regularly worked at a construction site, where he gained the respect and trust of others. Eventually, Lloyd escaped. Angela's family was notified in time, as they were potential targets. Every available resource was mobilized to capture him. Residents were informed through the news on radio and television, and updates were spread via text messages and social media. Police searched the area for 3 days and eventually found Lloyd, who was hiding in a wooded area near the prison. He was arrested again and returned to prison. He is currently serving time in a maximum security prison in Arkansas. Angela's family was devastated by her loss, and the unexpected escape of the criminal caused widespread concern. The grandmother felt guilty for not paying enough attention to her granddaughter, not checking her social media messages, and trusting her own judgment. She realized that she had allowed this criminal into their lives. Driven by a desire for justice, Angela's grandmother led the effort to create a petition called Angela's Law. The law requires closer monitoring of abusers. It has successfully passed through all necessary channels and is now in effect. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Edwin Valero. Edwin Valero was born on December 3, 1981, in Bolero Alto, Mérida, Venezuela. He was one of 5 children in the family. Edwin's father worked as a truck driver and was often away from home for days at a time. When Edwin was 7, his father abandoned the family completely, which had a significant impact on Edwin. His mother, who was left to raise the children alone, made life very difficult for them. She later entered a new relationship and had 3 more children. Edwin did not enjoy studying and dropped out of school at the age of 11, despite his mother always emphasizing the importance of education. Eventually, the family moved to a new neighborhood, where Edwin began helping his mother by selling fruit. In his spare time, he enjoyed practicing taekwondo, but the need to earn money limited his practice. One day, He won a basketball and a baseball photo album, which he traded for a bicycle. He then used the bicycle to sell ice cream and visit his siblings. Edwin learned to repair bicycles, and his mother helped him find an evening job repairing them. There, he worked with a former boxer who shared fascinating stories about boxing, sparking Edwin's growing interest in the sport. One evening in 1992, while working as a garlic delivery man, Edwin came across a gym named after the famous boxer who had won an Olympic gold medal. Edwin was fascinated by boxing and caught the attention of the trainer, who invited him to try boxing. Edwin was interested, but worried that he would leave his bag of garlic unattended while he worked. The coach encouraged him to come back the next day at 2 p.m., wearing shorts and sneakers. When Edwin returned, the coach assessed his skills and recognized his determination and discipline. Although his family did not approve of boxing, Edwin worked hard at the gym, diligently following the coach's instructions and training until he was exhausted. With each punch, he put in more effort, and the coach noticed that Edwin's punches were surprisingly powerful for a 12-year-old, reflecting his struggle and ambition to succeed. When Edwin turned 13, he asked his coach if he could stay overnight at the gym, and the coach agreed. Understanding Edwin's difficult circumstances, this decision marked the beginning of Edwin's childhood filled with boxing gloves, punching bags, and dreams of becoming a world champion. He trained hard, but over time, he faced some challenges. He started drinking, using drugs, and hanging out with bad influences. Despite these difficulties, he participated in 92 amateur boxing matches, winning 86 and scoring 45 knockouts, losing only 6. In 1998, he became the champion of Central America and the Caribbean islands. During this time, he met Jennifer Carolina Vieira de Valero, who would later become his wife. Jennifer's parents initially disapproved of their relationship, believing that Edwin had no bright future. In February 2001, Edwin's life took a tragic turn. While riding his motorcycle without a helmet and speeding to help his father, who had just had an accident, he crashed into a car. He fell off his motorcycle and hit his head on the pavement, suffering a brain injury. A blood clot formed in his head and was later removed. Medical reports indicated that the injury affected the nerves in his brain, resulting in slower reflexes, leading many to believe that his boxing career was over. Edwin spent 3 months in the hospital, with Jennifer by his side throughout his recovery. They fell in love at first sight, and no one could have predicted how tragic their love story would turn out to be. On January 7, 2002, Edwin returned to the boxing ring despite being advised not to fight again. He won the match by knocking out his opponent, proving his doubters wrong. On June 30, 2002, Jennifer gave birth to their first child when she was 15 years old. They faced difficulties getting married because they needed her parents' permission. However, Jennifer officially became his wife on October 8 of that same year. Edwin began his professional boxing career and quickly became famous. In his fights, he knocked out all his opponents in the first rounds, which attracted national attention. However, over time, he fell into bad habits, including drug and alcohol addiction. Despite these difficulties, he tried to give back to the community by establishing a foundation for the disabled. He later had a daughter born in California while pursuing new opportunities in the United States. Unfortunately, his situation worsened when one of his trainers began to steal his wages. Edwin learned that his sponsors were not fulfilling their financial commitments. As a result, he decided to return to Venezuela, where he was already a famous figure. His career quickly flourished. He successfully defended his title 4 times, winning each fight and earning millions of dollars, which motivated him to perform even better. He got a tattoo of the Venezuelan flag on his chest, featuring the face of the then president. This connection gave him considerable influence in the government, and he developed a friendship with the president. Edwin was known to be kind, polite, and friendly. However, When he drank, his attitude changed dramatically, becoming cruel and aggressive. The only person who truly understood him was his wife. Over time, his family began to notice unusual changes in his behavior and questioned him about possible drug use. Edwin changed daily, and these changes were quite obvious. Despite their attempts to help, Edwin became increasingly distant from his family. In September 2007, Edwin's mother and sister reported him for domestic violence after he assaulted them during a family argument. They also accused him of abusing his wife. This information emerged on April 4, 2009, when the International Boxing Association announced a new lightweight champion. On April 15, 2009, Valera attacked his wife Jennifer in the leg while drunk. He claimed it was an accident, but his family believed it was intentional. Edwin was involved in many serious incidents, but often escaped punishment because of his wealth and fame. He avoided responsibility due to his status as one of the top boxers of his time, and there were fears that he might be exploiting his connections in the government. He even killed a thief who stole his motorbike, but the case was settled with money. In 2010, Jennifer and Edwin's 2 children contacted his mother when his behavior became out of control. He spent days isolating himself, drinking and using drugs, and pressuring Jennifer to participate in these activities. Edwin was then taken to a clinic in Caracas for rehabilitation. Specialists prescribed medication and injections, but Edwin did not follow the instructions. On March 25, 2010, he threatened hospital staff because they were treating his wife, Jennifer, who had been admitted with bruises and a punctured lung due to broken ribs. Jennifer accidentally fell from a height of 3 meters while checking a non-functioning water tank. After the fall, she went to bed, but the pain in her back became unbearable. When she woke up, she informed her family, who took her to the hospital. However, doctors quickly suspected that she had been assaulted. The medical staff informed the police of their suspicions, and Edwin threatened to harm them if the news reached the media. He also threatened his wife, which eventually led to his arrest. The judge issued protective orders for Jennifer, preventing Edwin from approaching or threatening her. He was also not allowed near the hospital while his wife was there. Hospital staff were given additional protection. The judge ordered Edwin to attend rehabilitation at the hospital. On April 5, Jennifer was discharged and told the police that he had not abused her. On April 8, 2010, Edwin was released on bail. The unfortunate event occurred when Edwin and his wife traveled to the state of Bolívar in Venezuela. During the trip, Edwin noticed that a car was following them from the moment they left their home. When he reached the checkpoint, he sought help, fearing that someone might be trying to harm him. Edwin called a friend for protection during the trip, but the friend suggested that he stay overnight in Valencia because it was getting late. On April 17, 2010, at 11:30 p.m., Edwin and Jennifer arrived at a hotel in Valencia, Carabobo. They were seen chatting happily in the hotel lobby. To pay for his stay, Edwin withdrew some cash to exchange for local currency. Before returning to his room, he asked the staff to carefully check to make sure no one was following him. Despite checking the room, he requested a quieter room. At 5:30 a.m., Edwin walked barefoot to the hotel lobby and informed the staff that his wife was dead. He initially appeared calm, which led the staff to doubt his account until they checked the room. They then contacted the Carabobo State Police, and Edwin was arrested shortly thereafter. There were no signs of a struggle or fight in the room. Jennifer was found lying on a carpet. She had 3 stab wounds to her neck, but there were no signs of a struggle. There were beer cans and bottles next to her body. Additional bloodstains were found under the chair and in the bathroom, where a freshly laundered white towel was found. It is important to note that no knife or similar object was found that could have caused the injuries. After the room was examined, Jennifer's body was taken to the morgue for an autopsy. Edwin called his parents-in-law to inform them of their daughter's death, saying that she had been killed by hitmen who were chasing them. He then ended the call. The police spoke to Edwin to learn more about the case. In his initial statement, Edwin explained that he had slept with his wife after drinking heavily and using drugs. When he woke up, he found blood on his body and saw his wife's body lying next to him. He did not remember what had happened and was initially afraid that he had killed her. Confused, he went downstairs to report the incident, unsure if he was the culprit. He also told the police that they had been followed since leaving Bolero Alto, Mérida, Venezuela, suggesting that someone might have entered their hotel room and killed her. However, there were many inconsistencies in his testimony. That evening, Edwin's manager went to the police station to see him. Edwin expressed concern for his children and asked the manager to retrieve a suitcase containing $92,000 that the police had confiscated. While things seemed calm earlier that night, at around 1:30 a.m., on April 19, 2010, an inmate in a nearby cell heard a noise coming from Edwin's cell. He reported this to the police, who responded quickly and found Edwin dead. There was a white object stuck in his mouth, which was a photo of his wife and children. His body was then taken to the morgue. By 4 a.m., Edwin's family had been notified, and they went to the morgue. His sister mustered up the courage to view his body. On the metal plate, she saw a bruise on the back of his head, but there was no mark on his neck. There were also bruises on various parts of his body. The news of the incident was reported in the media, but few believed it to be true. Even his family insisted that he would never end his life because he was afraid of death. There was no sign of strangulation, which raised many questions. When Edwin entered prison, he was wearing black sweatpants and a black t-shirt with red stripes, along with an orange striped cap. But the media reported that he was wearing jeans. The police later explained that Edwin was allowed to shower and change his clothes. Rumors began to spread that Edwin's death was staged. Some even claimed that the body in the coffin was a wax figure and that Edwin had actually been taken to Cuba. Additionally, a suitcase of Edwin's money disappeared without a trace, adding to the mystery. Overall, the circumstances surrounding Edwin's death remain puzzling, with many indications that it may have been staged. One unresolved issue is the absence of a murder weapon. There were no signs of a struggle or bruises on Jennifer's body, which raises further questions about the circumstances of the incident. Furthermore, it was observed that the wound was not deep enough to cause immediate death. Another oddity is that the hotel security camera footage was never reviewed to determine if anyone entered the couple's room that night. Both deaths remain unclear. Police found Edwin's clothes in the hotel room, but only Jennifer's clothes were found in the car. Edwin's mother testified that she had placed his suitcases in the trunk, including one containing $92,000 that her son was supposed to take to Cuba. Reports say Edwin packed only 2 suitcases, a pink suitcase containing money and a brown suitcase containing clothes. However, photos from the crime scene only showed the brown suitcase, while the pink suitcase was missing. Police stated that they did not know where it was. Just hours before leaving Mérida, Edwin bought a blue Toyota, traded in his Toyota Camry, and handed over a check for 60,000 bolivars, with the rest in dollars. It is claimed that the man who sold Edwin the car noticed that the suitcase was full of cash, which has led to speculation that he may have followed Edwin to Valencia. The complex case raises numerous questions. It is unclear who killed Edwin's wife and what the motive was. Edwin's family, concerned about the circumstances of his death, has sought further investigation. On May 13, 2010, at 9 a.m., Edwin's body was exhumed in the presence of Mérida police, the National Guard, court officials, and representatives from the prosecutor's office. A mobile laboratory arrived at the scene shortly thereafter. 3 hours after the exhumation, specimens were collected and sent to the forensic department for analysis, which was expected to take 15 days. However, the results were not received until 2014, revealing that Edwin had been given a substance that caused his lungs to explode. Meanwhile, Jennifer's cause of death remains unresolved. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Jamie Osuna. The police discovered the body of a woman in a hotel room. A few days before this, a man named Jamie Osuna had called his ex-girlfriend to confess to a crime, which helped the police capture a dangerous individual, later known as the Man with 1,000 Faces. Jamie Osuna was born on 1988 in Bakersfield, California, USA. His life was marked by violence and cruelty from the start. His mother became pregnant at 19 by her abusive boyfriend, who was 21. His father was physically violent towards his mother, causing hearing damage to him, the unborn child. When Jamie was born, his father abandoned him in the car seat because he wouldn't stop crying. Eventually, his mother left the abusive man and then met another man. They had another child, but both Jamie and his brother suffered abuse from this man, with Jamie enduring the worst of it. He was treated terribly. He was fed on the floor like a dog, tied to a tree, and physically punished. His grandfather wanted nothing to do with him, and his uncle often hit him with a brick, while his mother was consistently cruel. This led Jamie to harbor deep resentment towards her for not protecting him. He dropped out of school in the 9th grade and soon began displaying violent behavior. At 15, he attacked another boy, marking the first of several incidents that would land him in prison. When Jamie was 20, he attended a birthday party for a boy who was turning 16. At the party, he noticed his friend's mother, Joelele Castellano, who was a 37-year-old woman he found very attractive. During the celebration, Jamie got into an altercation with another boy and used a knife. Although the injury was minor, he was sent back to prison because he was on parole. In prison, Jamie started writing letters to Joelle. To his surprise, she responded, and they began corresponding. Despite having only met once at the party, Joelle fell in love with Jamie. Joelle was so devoted to him that she arranged for his release once he completed his sentence. She waited outside the prison for several hours, and when Jamie finally emerged, she was shocked to see that he had gotten tattoos on his face, including one that resembled the Joker's smile. Initially, this made her uncomfortable, but she soon accepted it. That night, they spent together in a hotel, and she became pregnant with Jamie's first child. Joelle felt very happy during her pregnancy and enjoyed being with the man she loved. However, after some time, Jamie began to reveal his true nature. Jamie had a keen interest in philosophy and psychology. Joelle encouraged him, suggesting that with study, he could have a bright future. However, things took a dark turn when Jamie began to show controlling and cruel behavior. He tried to dominate Joelle's every action, but she resisted. Their arguments escalated, eventually becoming violent. Despite Joelle being pregnant, Jamie showed no concern for her well-being. After their child was born, she reported his violent behavior to the police, which led to his imprisonment. Upon his release, Jamie pleaded with Joelle for another chance, and she reluctantly agreed. Unfortunately, he fell into banned substance use, and his violence worsened, culminating in threats against her. Once again, Joelle reported him, and he returned to prison. Jamie was released on Halloween night in 2011, but he had transformed. His face was covered in tattoos intended to frighten Joelle, who now wanted nothing to do with him. He began to harass her, making threats over the phone and stalking her from the shadows. This harassment continued for several days until Joelle contacted the police, prompting Jamie to go into hiding. One day, Joel received a call from him. He confessed to attacking a girl in El Morocco motel. Her name was Yvette Pena. Yvette had her first child as a teenager. Compounding her difficulties, her partner began to show inappropriate interest in her. Over the years, she struggled with substance abuse and encountered legal problems, resulting in the loss of custody of all 6 of her children. Following this, she moved into a poorly regarded motel, the only affordable option as she tried to overcome her addiction and hoped to reunite with her children. However, Jamie's actions created barriers to this dream. After Jamie reported an incident at El Morocco motel to Joel, she contacted the police to confirm if there was a report of an attack on a woman there. The police informed her that no such report existed, leaving Joel feeling uneasy. She then called the motel to inquire about any similar incidents, but they declined to provide any information. A few days later, a staff member at the motel discovered a mutilated body in one of the rooms while cleaning. The scene was horrific, with bloodstains everywhere, indicating that the killer had been extremely brutal. The motel staff called the police, who remembered that Jamie had contacted Joel. So they reached out to her for a statement and assistance in locating him. With her help, they found Jamie hiding at his grandparents' house, where he was arrested and taken for questioning. During questioning, Jamie denied any involvement, claiming that he had called Joel just to scare her. He maintained that he had not killed anyone and only wanted to get his ex-girlfriend's attention to rekindle their relationship. The police found his story hard to believe, especially considering the timing while they awaited the coroner's report on the body. Jamie remained in custody. The woman's body was so badly mutilated that it took 8 months for investigators to receive the coroner's report. The examination revealed that she had been dead for 5 days before being found, which coincided with the day Jamie called Joel. Due to decomposition, the coroner faced challenges in the examination, but they determined that the woman had been assaulted with multiple stab wounds and cuts inflicted by scissors. The cause of death was asphyxiation, suggesting she was alive and aware during the attack. Additionally, male fingerprints and DNA were found at the scene. When compared to Jamie's DNA, they matched. Jamie claimed he had consensual contact with her that night, explaining the presence of his DNA, but the police did not believe him. He was then sent to prison to await trial. Even while in prison, Jamie continued to harass Joel. He sent her threatening letters written in blood and once mailed her a dead rat. He even discovered the address of the prosecutor handling his case and sent him several threatening letters as well. It was clear that he was not mentally stable. Jamie filed a complaint against Joel, claiming that she was abusive toward their son, which led the authorities to pass the complaint to the police, triggering an investigation into Joel. She was arrested, but a week later, it was concluded that no violence had occurred, and she was released. Despite this, Jamie had achieved his goal of making Joel suffer. The trial for Jamie began in 2017. Throughout his time in prison, he maintained his innocence. But 3 days before the trial, he gave an interview to a journalist who worked for a local radio station. She wanted to learn about Jamie's life. In the interview, Jamie appeared with numerous tattoos covering his arms, face, and neck, most of which imitated the character of the Joker. One of the last tattoos was a 5-pointed inverted star in the center of his forehead, a symbol known in pop culture as satanic. However, Jamie was never a Satanist, and of course the murder was not ritualistic. During the interview, Jamie, with an absolutely calm face, stated that he had taken a life and that his only motive was a desire to do so. He simply wanted to seize the opportunity. Jamie recounted horrific details that were not published, as the journalist and her editor came to an agreement that some things should remain confidential. She felt that these details were too gruesome and should not be revealed to Yvette's family. Thus, they only aired certain fragments of the interview, in which Jamie spoke about his childhood and not much about the murder of Yvette. Jamie mentioned that he had been interested in cruelty since childhood, starting with insects and rats. Once, when he was left home alone, a pet ended up in the freezer and later in the oven. He said that he derived a lot of pleasure from that day and realized that he enjoyed it. Cruel, horrific acts brought him more pleasure than anything else in the world. This seemed monstrous to everyone. He also mentioned that due to the violence of his stepfather in childhood, he lost the ability to feel pain and happiness. His classmates joked and told stories that made them laugh, but he couldn't even smile, even when he knew it was funny. He never felt the need to express this through a smile. Jamie also said that he did not feel joy when something good happened to him, such as receiving a high grade in school. He enjoyed feeling pain, as it pleased him. Besides, Jaime stated that Yvette was not his first victim. The previous year, he had killed a man and a woman. He did not provide any details, only stating that the woman was 32 and the man was 27, and that he had hidden the evidence very well so that no one would find out. He claimed that the events were intentional and that he left evidence on purpose so that he would be sent to prison, as he no longer wanted to be in society. He mentioned that there were other people like him who had been his mentors. He spent so much time with the corpse of one of his first victims that the body began to decompose. Jamie looked at the corpse to ensure that the image would remain in his memory for a long time. He also implied in the interview that his choice of victims was not based on age, gender, or occupation. What mattered to him was only that they were human. Jamie claimed that he did this by himself and was proud of it, regardless of the consequences. Perhaps one of the most important phrases he said was, "I have no sympathy. I am a sadist. I will do it again, again." The trial against Jamie began, and the prosecution presented a wealth of evidence, including photographs from the crime scene. Yvette's family was present in court and was warned that they would see some unpleasant images. Yvette's sister even said that it was impossible to identify Yvette's body in the photographs, and it still affected her. Despite being accused of a serious crime, Jamie laughed loudly, spoke with a smirk, and looked at Yvette's family without being able to behave seriously throughout all the court sessions. Of course, this is upsetting not only to the victim's family, but to everyone present. After many trials, Jamie's lawyer suggested a plea deal. If he pleaded guilty, he would avoid a death sentence, which would bring some relief to Yvette's family and others affected. March 28, 2017, Jaime Osuna pleads guilty to 6 charges. On May 14, 2017, during a hearing in which he taunted Yvette's family, smirking and rolling his eyes as they described the torment he had caused in their lives, Jaime was sentenced to life in prison without parole, along with mandatory rehabilitation therapy. He gave a thumbs up as Judge John S. Summers handed down the sentence. He agreed to the terms, believing that it would not significantly impact him. Jamie was then transferred to a state prison in Corcoran, located 350 kilometers from Sacramento, California. Everyone hoped this would be the conclusion of this tragic story, but unfortunately, it took a darker turn. While he was in prison, Jamie displayed violent behavior. He got into fights, harmed other inmates, and clashed with prison guards. As a result, he was deemed a threat to others and placed in isolation. Jamie spent 23 hours a day confined to his cell, with only 1 hour allotted for outdoor time when no other inmates were present. During that hour, he would walk in circles, which was his only way to cope with the situation. On March 7, 2019, he was assigned a new cellmate, Luis Romero, a 44-year-old man who had been transferred from another prison in California. Luis had a criminal history involving gang affiliations and the murder of a woman when he was a teenager. After serving 27 years in prison, he was close to being released. It remains unclear why he was placed in the same cell as Jamie. Just 2 days later, on the morning of March 9, only 1 inmate was found alive. When prison staff conducted a routine check at 7:30 a.m., they were shocked to find Jamie's cell drenched in blood. Luis's body was in a grotesque position, and Jaime wears a necklace made from the body parts of fellow prisoner. The walls of the cell were marked with red messages. "I am not crazy. I just think differently." And, "You will never be alone. You will never be sad. You can always dance with me." Jamie used a metal blade he had concealed in his cell to commit the violent act. It was revealed that the prison staff did not perform night patrols, which made it easier for Jamie to carry out his plan. Many were shocked not only by the brutality of the act, but also by the fact that a dangerous criminal was placed in a cell with another inmate after previously being in isolation. Justin Sterling, the lawyer representing Luis's family, filed a lawsuit against the California prison, arguing that an inmate known for his violent behavior should not have been housed with a cellmate. In court, Jamie proclaimed his innocence regarding the murder charge. At his lawyer's request, a psychiatric evaluation was conducted, leading to a diagnosis of an unspecified type of schizophrenia, antisocial personality disorder, and borderline personality disorder. Consequently, the court deemed Jamie insane and unable to stand trial, sentencing him to a psychiatric program at Salinas Valley State Prison for treatment before any trial could occur. Jaime Osuna is a cruel man with a harsh upbringing who has shown a desire to take lives from a young age. It's surprising that he was placed with a cellmate. Because of this error, another person lost their life. Although it could be argued that he had 4 victims, only 2 have been officially confirmed. Serial killers often exaggerate their victim count to feel more important or to instill greater fear. At present, there are no clues and no bodies have been discovered, so nothing further can be confirmed. Regardless, no one can deny the horror of this case. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Suzanne Sills. On Sunday, November 13, 2016, Dr. Scott Sills, a renowned fertility specialist in California, called 911 to report that his wife, Suzanne, had fallen down the stairs. When he found her, she showed no signs of life. Scott activated the speakerphone for the call. The dispatcher guided him on how to provide first aid, and he followed the instructions while their children were nearby. He claimed that Suzanne showed signs of life after the first aid was administered. When the paramedics arrived, Scott stated that she was alive. However, the paramedics suspected that he was mistaken because she was already deceased. The police were then notified, and several officers arrived at the house. They noticed bruises on Suzanne's neck that appeared to be from strangulation, indicating that her injuries could not have been caused by a simple fall down the stairs. Scott told the police that Susan wanted to walk her dog, as she did every morning. He suggested that after she fell down the stairs, the dogs might have pulled her scarf, leading to her suffocation and leaving marks on her body. However, the police suspected that the dogs could not have caused Suzanne's death in this way, so they concluded that she had been murdered. They especially believed that Scott could be the real killer. To investigate further, they first looked at Scott's testimony. Was it possible that Suzanne fell down the stairs and suffered fatal injuries? This seemed plausible since the stairs were over 4 meters high and very steep. However, Suzanne was a 45-year-old woman in excellent physical condition and had always been careful, so a fall seemed unlikely. During their examination, the police discovered injuries all over Suzanne's body. Her face was covered in bruises, and both her arms and legs had wounds that could not have resulted from a fall. Additionally, items found near her body raised further questions, as they did not align with Scott's account. Meanwhile, he appeared surprisingly calm, even with his wife's body lying dead in the house. Despite the suspicions surrounding him, Scott cooperated fully with the police, allowing them to search his house and providing all necessary information and DNA samples. Meanwhile, one of the officers began questioning Scott and Suzanne's children. They had 2 children, 12-year-old Eric and his twin sister, Mary Catherine. Both children shared that their mother, Suzanne, had been unwell the day before, suffering from migraines, which she experienced periodically. The pain was quite debilitating for her. During these episodes, she would retreat to a dark room, lie down, and remain quiet. Next to her body was a saucepan, an item she often kept close during these times in case she felt nauseous. Suzanne would place it near her bed, and when she woke up in the morning and decided to take the dogs for a walk, she would bring it with her to the kitchen. An empty pill bottle found nearby contained painkillers that Suzanne used to manage her migraines. Her husband, Scott, described their relationship as warm, and both children confirmed that their parents shared a deeply understanding and loving bond. They rarely fought and were generally seen as very positive individuals. With information from family members, the investigators were able to piece together what happened before the tragedy. On Saturday evening, November 12, 2016, Suzanne went to sleep in Mary's room, which was the quietest and darkest place, to manage her pain. Around midnight, Scott checked on Suzanne to see how she was doing. Since Suzanne was already asleep, Mary chose to sleep in her parents' room instead. Detectives discovered a heartfelt note Mary left for her mother on the door, expressing her love and wishing her a speedy recovery. Eric said that at around 4 a.m., he woke up after hearing an argument between his parents, Suzanne and Scott. He was resting in the next room, listening to the loud and seemingly annoyed voices. He also did not hear any other unusual noises. After about 5 minutes, Scott decided to sleep in the main bedroom where Mary was sleeping. When Scott entered, Mary woke up and asked what was happening. He explained that he and Suzanne had argued over a work-related email, assuring her that there was no need to worry. Scott later told the police that when he checked on Suzanne at 4 a.m., she was working on her laptop. He tried to convince her to go to bed because she was feeling unwell due to a migraine, but she refused and continued working, which led to tension between the two. Eventually, the family went back to sleep. They woke up at 6:30 a.m. Scott suggested to Mary that they should go swimming. However, when she came out of the bedroom, she found her mother unresponsive at the bottom of the stairs. Her mother was lying on the floor with a long scarf around her neck, and there was a saucepan nearby. Mary screamed and called for her father, Scott. Scott noted that Susan often used this scarf to wrap around her head during migraines. This scarf belonged to Mary. However, there were questions about whether the dogs accidentally knocked her down and caused her to strangle herself. Could she have fallen in such a way that a scarf wrapped around her neck, leading to her death? These scenarios seemed unlikely, and suspicious details began to emerge. For example, if she was carrying an empty saucepan with her when she fell down the stairs, why did no one hear the noise and wake up in the early morning hours? The saucepan would have made noise hitting the tiled floor and stairs, so it couldn't have fallen silently. Additionally, it was odd that she had a scarf on a warm day. The police began to suspect her husband, Scott, especially since a cut was found on his forehead. Scott also had a large bruise on his arm. He suggested that he got these injuries while repairing his car in the garage the day before. According to his statement, his son, Eric, assisted him with the repairs. However, there was a contradiction. Eric claimed that his father was not injured that day. They had left the garage together and entered the house, and during that time, Eric did not notice any injuries on his father. Eric also informed investigators that he saw his mother, Suzanne, putting the dogs in a cage a few hours before her death. Normally, after this, the dogs would go to sleep. Eric was puzzled as to why his mother would take them for a walk so early in the morning, especially when she seemed to be in a weakened state. While investigating Mary's bedroom, where Susan had spent the night, Authorities discovered suspicious bloodstains on the curtains, wall, and bedside table. Mary asserted that when her mother entered the room, it was entirely clean and free of blood. Scott claimed that the bloodstains were old, from cuts he had made while replacing mosquito screens on his windows last spring. However, the stains appeared fresh. Despite the presence of the bloodstains, this evidence was insufficient to charge or arrest Scott. Then, Suzanne's body was sent for forensic examination, and officers left the house after 4 days. Although the autopsy was performed, the forensic expert could not provide clear answers. The examination revealed multiple injuries on the body, which could have been caused by either a fall down the stairs or physical assault. Strangulation was also a possibility. The most severe injury was a fracture at the base of the neck. Additionally, broken blood vessels in the eyes were found, a typical sign of strangulation. However, experts could not determine for certain whether the injuries were accidental or indicative of criminal activity. A more thorough analysis of all evidence was needed, which could take months, and no one wanted to rush, given the complexity and contentious nature of the case. The forensic experts concentrated on examining additional evidence gathered from the house, particularly the blood, which appeared suspicious. They also sent traces of blood and other items, including a phone and a laptop, for analysis. The Suzanne family had limited interaction with their neighbors, as they worked long hours and rarely engaged with others. Consequently, no one could provide useful information about what was happening inside their home. Additionally, no one reported hearing anything unusual during the night or in the morning. Investigators used communication tools to gather more information. This helped them identify people who had close relationships with Suzanne and Scott, thereby finding witnesses who could shed light on the motive for the incident. They spoke with students whom Scott taught, who described him as cheerful and kind. He always attended class dressed in an elegant three-piece suit. Some students who had a lot of interaction with him said he was the sweetest person. One girl recounted how he helped her financially multiple times when she couldn't afford lunch or a taxi home due to her family's financial struggles. Scott showed her great compassion. From a young age, it seemed that Scott had great potential. After finishing high school, he was accepted into law school and later pursued medical studies. His intelligence, determination, and hard work enabled him to become a successful specialist in reproductive issues. His work led him to meet Suzanne. She came to his clinic because she was struggling to conceive with her first husband. At that time, Suzanne had just graduated with a master's degree in business administration. She shared her fertility issues with Scott, who then took charge of her treatment. Over time, their professional relationship developed into a romantic one. Eventually, Suzanne decided to file for divorce. Suzanne was witty, cheerful, and very attractive, making her a loyal friend and a wonderful life partner. At a reunion of their business school, Scott attended with Suzanne, and they appeared to be a happy couple. So, when they announced their engagement, no one was surprised. Scott successfully addressed Suzanne's fertility issues through IVF, and she became pregnant, later giving birth to twins. Suzanne admired her husband greatly. She considered him a genius and an expert who could help many women. Thanks to Suzanne's efforts and her husband Scott's expertise, they opened a clinic together in April 2015. Suzanne played a crucial role in building and managing the business, while her husband focused on the medical procedures. Through this venture, they became very wealthy and purchased an expensive house in a prestigious part of the city. Scott developed an interest in luxury cars, and the family indulged in a lavish lifestyle. By this time, Scott had gained fame as a specialist. He was recognized due to his frequent television appearances. He authored several books and regularly contributed to professional publications, earning a reputation as one of the top experts in his field. It seemed that he and his wife Suzanne worked well together. However, shortly before the incident, they experienced disagreements over a photograph that Susan posted on her social media. Afterward, Friends noticed tension between them, especially when Suzanne's relatives and friends learned about the death and the circumstances surrounding it. Many believed the incident was suspicious. By the time detectives began interviewing witnesses, several had already met with Scott. They found that he did not want to talk about the incident, which made the investigators even more suspicious. They now increasingly believe it was a deliberate murder. During this time, forensic experts visited Scott's home multiple times. They observed that he did not express any regret and appeared to be unemotional. While he often praised Suzanne as a talented businesswoman, he rarely acknowledged her qualities as a loving wife and mother. It seemed that his affection for her was more about their business partnership than about love. The morning after Suzanne was declared dead, Scott went to work as though nothing had happened, surprising the entire staff. Everything appeared the same as any other morning, and it seemed he wasn't troubled by the situation at all. Contrary to what everyone expected, he didn't take time off to grieve for his wife. The clinic's manager and several employees spoke with detectives, noting that Scott avoided discussions about Suzanne. Furthermore, Scott quickly began to change his appearance. Before Suzanne's death, he looked like an average balding man, but afterward, he underwent a hair transplant and now had a thick head of hair. His activity on social media also increased. He maintained his personal page without mentioning any sorrow over his wife's passing. In fact, he started going to the gym, dining out, and dressing well, giving the impression that he was looking for a new girlfriend and was indifferent to his wife's fate. Soon after, Scott started dating someone, and their relationship progressed quickly. However, the police felt they still lacked evidence. They needed to gather all the information and find new incriminating details. In 2018, the coroner's office provided the results of a thorough analysis. The forensic expert determined that the cause of Suzanne's death was strangulation, which left marks on her neck post-mortem. Additionally, DNA tests revealed a mix of blood from Suzanne and Scott in Mary's room, indicating a struggle and suggesting that Suzanne was attacked by Scott. On August 8, 2018, nearly 2 years after Suzanne's death, detectives visited Scott's house and directly asked him if he had killed his wife. He became visibly nervous, sweating and adopting a defensive posture. Scott denied the allegations regarding the blood, claiming he had injured himself while fixing the mosquito net on the door. However, this raised the question of how his wife's blood ended up there. Meanwhile, Mary stated that she had not seen any bloodstains until the police arrived and found her mother deceased. Although there was clear evidence of the crime, the officers were not in a rush to file charges. They decided that more evidence was needed, including examining Suzanne's phone. They believed that social media could provide important clues. After investigating, they discovered some disturbing details. Suzanne often had harsh reactions towards her husband, Scott. About 3 months before her death, she expressed feeling trapped in their relationship and wanted to end it. After that, she occasionally told her husband that they were not a good match. A month before her death, Suzanne confided in a friend about having a difficult relationship with Scott and her desire to leave him. However, she felt he was holding her back due to their joint business. According to her friend, a photo she had posted became a significant issue in their relationship. Scott was unhappy about the photo. When the police checked Scott's phone, they found a screenshot of this picture from August 30, 2016. It appeared that this revelation became the motive for the murder, fueled by jealousy. The police discovered that the day after Suzanne's death, Scott attempted to collect a $250,000 payment from her life insurance policy. However, his claim was denied because of suspicions of murder. On April 25, 2019, nearly 2 years after her death, Scott was arrested for the alleged murder. He was apprehended while preparing for another surgery and was detained, with bail set at $1 million. He quickly paid the bail and was released, waiting for trial. Then, a woman reported to the police that she had dated Scott while Suzanne was still alive. They initially met through social media, and it appeared he was very interested in her. However, he soon ended the relationship. A woman shared a text message she received from Scott 2 weeks after Suzanne's death, in which he expressed his desire to rekindle their relationship as he was now single. There are several motives for why Scott could have killed Suzanne: to gain money, to avoid dividing their assets in a potential divorce, or simply to remove her as an obstacle to dating other women. However, Scott's attorney argued that the text messages were simply a father's way of trying to find a new mother for his 2 children. In November 2023, 7 years after Suzanne's death, Scott Sills faced trial. Cameras were prohibited in the prosecutor's office but allowed in the courtroom. Scott appeared uncomfortable with the media attention, as he had faced significant scrutiny throughout this ordeal. He lost his medical license and seemed to be struggling emotionally. According to the prosecutor's office, on November 13, 2016, Scott attacked Suzanne at 4 a.m. when their son, Eric, heard the argument. He physically assaulted her multiple times and ultimately strangled her to death. He then staged the scene to make it look like she had fallen down the stairs, and he went to sleep, pretending not to know what happened the next morning. Despite this, Scott's lawyer presented a defense, indicating that he was determined to fight the charges. The attorney stated that Susan woke up that morning, tried to go to the kitchen to get a pan, and continued her daily activities. However, due to the effects of her migraine medication and her general weakness, she fell down the stairs and was injured by the family dogs. The dogs interpreted the situation as a game, tugging on the ends of the scarf around Suzanne's neck. As they pulled in different directions, they inadvertently strangled her, causing her to die relatively quickly. In an unexpected turn, Mary came forward to support Scott. She stated that when she left her room, she saw the dogs pulling on the scarf around Suzanne's neck, but initially did not comprehend the situation. She admitted that she had not spoken up sooner because she was just a child at the time of her mother's tragic death. Mary explained that she didn't realize the importance of the information regarding the scarf. She noted that they removed the scarf while providing first aid to her mother, which is why it ended up away from the body. The defense tested the scarf for dog DNA, which came back positive. Additionally, toxicology tests indicated that Suzanne had a mixture of sedatives and painkillers in her system, making her muscles difficult to control and overly relaxed after sleeping. In the days leading up to her fall, she had poor nutrition and felt weak, which could have contributed to an accidental fall that resulted in a neck injury, potentially leading to suffocation without help. The defense argued that the dogs played only a minor role in the case. They claimed that even if the dogs hadn't dragged the scarf, Suzanne could still have died since no one heard her fall or called for emergency assistance. However, the prosecution found this explanation unconvincing, stating that the noise from her fall should have been noticeable. They believed that Scott used the scarf to strangle her. In contrast, Mary claims that her mother, Suzanne, often uses the scarf to keep warm when she has a migraine, which helps her mother feel better. However, the prosecutor's office made its strongest argument that during their search of the house, they found no evidence that Susan had been on the stairs. If she had fallen down 4 meters of steps, there would likely have been blood or DNA traces, but none were found. The prosecution argued that Scott himself moved the body to make it look like a fall. They emphasized the positioning of Suzanne's body. Although the 911 dispatcher instructed Scott to perform CPR on a flat surface, when paramedics arrived, Suzanne's leg was still on the stairs. This indicated that he was not genuinely trying to help her, but was only pretending. Furthermore, the prosecution maintained that Scott had a strong motive, as a photo posted by Suzanne had sparked jealousy and anger. The jury testified in the 3-week trial. Ultimately, they had to reach a verdict. After hearing closing arguments from both the prosecution and defense and deliberating for 3 hours, the jury found 58-year-old Scott Sills not guilty of first-degree murder, but guilty of second-degree murder. This means that Scott, a man who has helped many women, has now been convicted of murdering his wife. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Upon hearing the verdict, Mary broke down in tears in the courtroom. She was heartbroken at the thought of losing her mother, while her father would spend the rest of his life in prison. She claimed that there was a mistake in the trial and was determined to seek justice with her defense attorney, but the sentence remained unchanged. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alexandra Fossmo. Helge Fossmo was born on July 27, 1971, in a small village in central Sweden. He is one of 5 siblings. His parents were not religious, which is not often the case for people who follow a faith, as they are typically influenced by their families. However, Helge developed an interest in the church on his own. At the age of 12, he joined the youth group of his local religious community, and his parents supported his decision. They recognized his strong interest in the church and did not object. In fact, they later came to see it as a positive choice for their son. Helge describes the church as a source of salvation for him. Despite his young age, he was one of the most active members of the community, regularly attending church meetings and events. This involvement lasted for 5 years, until he began working at a Christian youth cafe in 1988. There, he met his first love, a girl named Helene. They were both attracted to each other, and their relationship progressed as they grew up. The couple eventually married and had 2 children. During this time, Helge continued to explore his faith and became a preacher in the local community. In 1993, a pivotal encounter took place. Helge met Åsa Waldau, a woman who claimed to be the bride of Christ. She was the leader of a Christian sect. Åsa hails from Knutby, where the cult originated, and travels from town to town preaching and gaining followers. Her main focus is on teenagers and young adults, making Helge's family an ideal target for recruitment. She consistently uses the same strategy to convince young people to leave their homes and join her church. However, their first meeting was not easy. When Åsa approached Helge, a devoted Christian, he reacted harshly and expressed disbelief at the idea of a woman becoming a pastor. He found her beliefs and interpretation of the Bible too extreme for his taste. Despite this, Åsa was determined not to give up. She saw potential in Helge's family and wanted to attract them to her group. Åsa planned to proceed cautiously over the coming years. Åsa spent a lot of time gaining the trust of Helge's family, assuring them that her community's activities were safe. At the same time, she began to influence their beliefs, especially Helge's. It took nearly 4 years, from 1993 to 1997, for Åsa to convince Helge's family to accept her teachings and move to Knutby. At first, she treated it as a visit, giving them a tour of her church and explaining her work and goals in detail. Over time, Åsa gained more and more attention from the family. The community she built provided jobs for those in need, and almost every member had specific responsibilities, many of which involved religious activities. This fostered a strong sense of community where everyone knew and supported each other. The residents of Knutby were a tight-knit group and welcomed Helge and his family with open arms. Helge resumed his previous role as pastor of the new church. It didn't take long for his sermons to reveal unconventional topics, often discussing taboo subjects like abuse and death. Some parishioners were skeptical of Helge's interpretation of the Bible. However, he persisted in his mission. 2 years after moving in, the Helge family welcomed their 3rd child, bringing more responsibility to everyone. To manage the increased workload, they decided to hire a nanny. After a short search, they chose Sarah Svensson, who had recently moved to the city. Sarah grew up in a Christian community and came from a religious family. Since childhood, she had struggled with severe allergies, which prevented her from living a normal life. During this time, her mother cared for her, and they developed a very close relationship. Sadly, her mother passed away after a long illness when Sarah was only 11 years old. This loss had a profound impact on Sarah, causing her to run away from home and become a troubled teenager. After her mother passed away, her father took on the responsibility of raising her. Although he had a busy job, he devoted all his free time to her. They shared a strong bond, but he could not fill the void left by her mother. Sarah stayed with her father until she happened to meet Asa while traveling from city to city for a Bible study. They quickly connected, and Sarah seemed like a good candidate to be accepted into the cult. Asa easily recognized her weaknesses and exploited them. Sarah then decided to move to Knutby to be closer to the church. During this time, Helgi grew closer to Asa than ever before. They often spent time together not only studying the Bible. The two of them received several messages from above, which they interpreted as prophecies sent by God. According to these messages, Helga was the King of Kings, and Asa was the Queen of Heaven. Asa insisted that marrying Helgi would allow for the creation of the Great Alliance, taking their faith to new heights. In 1999, a wedding-like ceremony took place between Helgi and Asa. During the ceremony, Helgi presented Asa with a ring containing 7 diamonds, a number that has sacred significance in many faiths. At the same time, Helga's legal wife, Helene, felt very jealous of the situation. This jealousy led to tension in their relationship. Asa intervened and criticized Helene for her jealousy, claiming that it was the worst emotion a true Christian could feel. She urged Helene to change her attitude, warning that the church could create serious problems for her, including the risk of losing her home. Meanwhile, the relationship between Helge and Asa became increasingly dysfunctional. Despite being married, Helge neglected his family and devoted all his time to Asa, especially after the ceremony. Asa showered him with affection and compliments, which deepened his feelings for her. Asa used this affection to control Helgi. She was subtle and effective in her approach, quickly taking control of almost every aspect of his life. Asa convinced Helga that he was the reincarnation of Jesus. These strange beliefs attracted attention and became increasingly extreme. The behavior of this unusual couple became more provocative. With Asa's manipulative tendencies, it was clear that this situation would not end well. On the morning of December 18, 1999, Helge and Helene had breakfast together. Afterward, Helge decided to lie down and rest, quickly falling asleep. While he was sleeping, he heard a knock on the door. When he woke up, he found that his wife was missing. A neighbor had come to check on him because they hadn't heard from him all day and were very worried. Helge opened the door and assured the neighbor that everything was fine. However, the neighbor wanted to see Helene, but she was not there either. He called out to her, but she did not respond, which worried Helge. He remembered that she had gone to take a bath and realized that she had been in there for a long time. Concerned, the two men decided to check on her, but Helene still did not respond when they called her name. They decided to unlock the bathroom door with a screwdriver. Inside, they found Helene lying face down in a bathtub full of water. The door was locked from the inside, and she was still wearing the nightgown she had on for breakfast. Helgi screamed so loudly that he attracted the attention of several neighbors who came to his house. Together, they pulled her out of the water and attempted CPR, but sadly, it was too late. Helene was later pronounced dead at the age of 27. During the investigation, it was discovered that Helene had suffered severe head injuries. The medical examiner believed that her death could have been caused by several factors. The head injury may have caused her to lose consciousness, leading to asphyxiation. The toxicology report added further complications to the case, revealing a very high concentration of dextropropoxyphene in her body. This amount alone could have been fatal, but there was no indication that Helene had taken the drug, and its presence in her body remained a mystery. Although foul play was suspected, the police concluded that it was an accident. They believed that she had slipped, fallen, and hit her head on the faucet. The housekeeper, Sarah, played a key role in this conclusion, corroborating Helga's claim that Helene was alone in the bathroom and that no one could have harmed her. Helge appeared deeply saddened and genuinely mourned his wife's death. However, those who knew him well noticed some strange behavior. He quickly discarded all items related to his wife and seemed to forget her completely. He even forbade his children from mentioning their mother. Some speculated that Helene's death was not an accident. It was also revealed that Helge had influenced the results of the autopsy. He initially requested that an autopsy not be performed on religious grounds, but this request was denied due to the suspicious circumstances surrounding her death. He later insisted that the autopsy report not mention an opium overdose, claiming that this was necessary to prevent the implication that his wife might have taken her own life, which he believed would prevent her from going to heaven. He justified his actions by saying he wanted to protect Helene's reputation and that of family. During this time, Asa suddenly lost interest in Helge, leading to the end of their tumultuous relationship. She went on a pilgrimage to various cities and chose not to return. Meanwhile, Helge quickly found new love with a girl named Alexandra Waldau, Asa's sister. Their relationship developed rapidly, partly due to Helge's status. By this time, many people considered him to be close to God and treated him with great respect. In the spring of 2000, Alexandra moved into Helge's house, and soon after, the couple got married. However, Helge's need for intimacy grew stronger, and he was never satisfied with just one woman. In the spring of 2001, he began courting the children's nanny, Sarah, who still worked for Helge's family. She readily accepted his attention, viewing him as a respected person. At this time, the relationship between Sarah and Helge became clear. Helge actively took advantage of Sarah's kindness and often invited her to pray with him in church. During this period, he frequently relied on messages from God. Sarah was so infatuated with Helge that she accepted all his stories without question, even feeling a sense of divine inspiration in those moments. She truly believed that she was doing something good. However, the reality was that she had fallen into the trap of a manipulator who sought to exploit her while pretending to uphold spiritual values. His intentions were completely contrary to any religious principles. As their relationship developed, Helge began to make increasingly controversial statements, claiming that God fought on earth and that he was his warrior. He explained that this role was difficult, as it sometimes required removing various obstacles. Sarah naively believed everything he said because he was a pastor, and his sermons were considered messages from God. In reality, Helge was secretly planning something harmful. He began telling Sarah that God was sending him important messages, indicating that Alexandra would soon die. He manipulated Sarah into thinking that God had shown him she was the perfect mate for him. He also threatened Sarah by saying that he would die if he did not end his marriage to Alexandra. Although their marriage was falling apart, Helge, as a pastor, could not get a divorce due to strict rules. Like many women around her, Sarah was drawn to his stories. These strange messages brainwashed Sarah, causing her to commit terrible acts. Helge manipulated her, using his power in the church and exploiting her weaknesses. He learned many control tactics from Asa and applied them. At this time, many people genuinely believed that he was very close to God, so Helge had no difficulty manipulating Sarah to his advantage. During this time, Helge still lived with Alexandra, but they had separate rooms. Every night Helgi would be intimate with both women, alternating between them. He claimed this was part of a ritual to fight demons, portraying himself as God's messenger battling evil spirits. His persuasive words convinced the women of his role, and the arrangement continued until 2003. Alexandra and Helga separated but continued to live together. However, they could not formally divorce because her husband wanted to keep her. During this time, Helga's manipulation of Sarah intensified. He would often approach her only for intimacy and frequently insulted her. Despite this emotional abuse, he always ended with the words, "I love you." Sarah wanted to hear these words so much that she ignored his abuse. She seemed willing to do anything to gain God's approval, not realizing that her will was being manipulated, turning her into a puppet for a dangerous person. Helgi repeatedly confronts his lover, Sarah, about her intention to kill in the name of God. Sarah says she is not ready to do this. Helgi then decides to manipulate her further. He creates a new account on a messaging app and begins sending her messages from an unknown number, claiming that it is God trying to contact her. In these disturbing messages, she is warned that she does not have much time left and must kill in the name of God before November 25. At first, Sarah suspects that Helgi is behind these messages, but he vehemently denies it. He resorts to shaming her again, accusing her of lacking faith. Helgi then sends her messages claiming that she is destined to participate in a divine plan to lead souls to heaven. The next message asserts that this is the only path to her salvation. Eventually, this manipulation instills real fear in her soul, causing Sarah to commit a crime. On the night of November 8, 2003, Alexandra awoke in bed to find Sarah attacking her with a hammer. Remarkably, Alexandra fought off the attack. The reason for the attack was a message that Sarah believed she had received from God, instructing her to kill the pastor's wife. Surprisingly, Sarah was not punished for her actions, possibly because Helgi insisted that the incident be kept secret and not reported to the police. As a result, there was no official record of the attack, and the situation was covered up. Consequently, Helgi banished Sarah, declaring that she must live with her father for the rest of her life. Unfortunately, this did not affect Sarah's relationship with God. She continued to receive messages convincing her of the need to kill. Soon after these events, Helga began a relationship with a neighbor named Annette Linde, who was married to Daniel Linde. Worried about his new rival, Helgi began sending Sarah messages demanding that she kill, accompanied by threats if she did not comply. Still under the influence of the messages from God, Sarah agreed to take up arms again. Helgi maintained complete control over his former lover Sarah, turning her into a puppet. Although she failed to fulfill God's plan the first time, she was given a second chance. This time, Sarah was better prepared. She bought weapons and learned how to make a silencer at home online. She diligently followed God's instructions, hoping to succeed and free her soul. On January 10, 2004, Sarah got into her father's car. Staying in touch with Helga, she approached his house at 3:30 a.m. It is important to note that Alexandra was still living in Helga's house during this time. Sarah parked her car 500 meters away. To avoid detection, she wore a black mask and shoes of different sizes to distract the police. The front door was unlocked. Helgi had broken the lock first to make it look like a robbery. Alexandra was sleeping in bed, completely unaware of the danger she was in. Sarah entered Alexandra's room and attacked her. When Alexandra woke up screaming, Sarah opened fire, killing her on the spot. Then at 4:30 a.m., Sarah went to kill her next target, Daniel, the husband of Helga's new lover. He knew Daniel was home alone and informed Sarah about this. However, the door was locked. Sarah knocked on the door, and when Daniel opened it, she raised her gun and killed him without hesitation. After Daniel fell, she ran away, not knowing that he had survived and was trying to call for help. When the police arrived, Daniel was still conscious enough to describe his attacker. At that time, Helge was already on the scene, wanting to help his neighbor. He accompanied Daniel to the hospital, where he learned that his wife had been killed. Helge then began to act like a grieving husband. Unfortunately, the description Daniel gave of his attacker was unclear because she was wearing a mask, and he could not see her face clearly. Sarah gradually became the center of attention. A neighbor, who was not influenced by faith, recalled that Helge's first wife had died under similar mysterious circumstances. Then there was the hammer attack on his second wife, Alexandra. She may have been the victim of murder, but miraculously, she fought back. At the scene of Alexandra's attack and on Daniel's door, police found Sarah's bloody fingerprints, providing clear evidence of her involvement. Sarah insisted that she acted alone and that no one had encouraged her to do so. She later claimed that she had committed the crime in the name of God. When her phone was confiscated, police discovered Helge's number as well as an unknown number. Although there were no messages from God, they did find a call from Helge. After a thorough search, another cell phone was found in her home, containing numerous messages describing a disturbing and manipulative relationship with God. This phone contained over 1,000 text messages in which Sarah expressed her compulsion to kill. It was soon discovered that the unknown number belonged to Helge, a local church pastor. Sarah was devastated by the news, as she truly believed that her conversations on the messaging app were of divine origin. After learning the truth, she decided to share all the details with the police. Annette, the wife of the injured Daniel, was also suspected of being involved and was arrested. However, she was released 2 weeks later without charge when the police confirmed her innocence. During the trial, Helge appeared arrogant, denied any wrongdoing, and showed no remorse for his actions. Psychiatrists evaluated him and determined that he was sane. The extent of his manipulation was staggering. The prosecution had enough evidence to convict Helge of inciting Alexandra's murder and the attempted murder of Daniel. Helge Fossmo was sentenced to life in prison, but was eligible for parole after 24 years. He has appealed several times over the years, all of which were rejected. He was also charged in connection with the death of his first wife, but he was acquitted due to insufficient evidence. In 2007, while in prison, Helge married for a third time, but the identity of his wife remains unknown. In an interview in August 2006, he confessed to being involved in Alexandra's death and the attempted murder of Daniel. He claimed that several other people helped organize the murder, but the case has never been reopened. Helge Fossmo is currently serving his sentence in Tidaholm prison in Sweden. During the trial, a video of the crime reenactment was played, in which Sarah detailed how she committed the crime. An edited version of the video was discovered during the private investigation and played in court. Although Sarah was the one who carried out the attack, inaccuracies in the reenactment raise questions about what really happened and who was responsible. There was suspicion that Helge may have been the real killer. Sarah Svensson was declared insane and committed to a psychiatric hospital. In 2011, her treatment ended, and she was released after doctors determined she was no longer a threat to society. Asa Waldau, a church leader, was convicted in 2020 of 8 counts of assaulting a former parishioner and sentenced to community service. After her experience, she changed her last name, started a new job, and stayed away from the church. Daniel survived the attack thanks to the efforts of doctors, but he chose not to return to the city because he feared the local church. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Michelle Kitterman. When a person capable of betrayal appears in a circle of close friends, this clearly cannot lead to anything good, especially if a love triangle is involved. Lacey Hurst Pavick was born in 1974 in Tonasket, Washington State, a tiny town with a population located south of the Canadian border. Her family owned the largest and most popular restaurant in the city, which made them local celebrities. They were quite wealthy, everyone in the city knew and respected them, some were even afraid of them. According to eyewitnesses, Lacey always had trouble making friends. Many children avoided her because she belonged to a privileged background. However, this did not particularly worry Lacey. She had a narrow circle of trusted friends. In high school, Lacey dated boys but only experienced real feelings when she met a young man named Brandon. At least, that was her first love, which eventually developed into marriage. Unfortunately, this relationship did not last long. After some time, Lacey and Brandon decided to get a divorce, with Lacey being the initiator. They then began a fight for sole custody of their children. Lacey's influential family managed to provide her with the best divorce lawyer, and the children remained with her. According to Lacey, the reason for the separation was constant quarrels with her husband, although the specifics were never disclosed. Nevertheless, it was believed that her husband was a decent person who never raised a hand against her. After the divorce, Lacey got a job as a financial director at a car dealership, where she met a man named Danny Pavick. Danny was quite an attractive bachelor, well known in the city and a favorite among women. Many wanted to build a relationship with him, but he, by his own admission, was only interested in wealthy Lacey. Danny warmly accepted her and her children. Their relationship before the wedding lasted almost 8 years, and finally, Lacey had everything she had dreamed of: a family, a new husband, a home, and a career. Despite being very busy, Lacey always found time to relax with her husband, friends, or relatives. Danny was drawn to her cheerful life and willingly participated in various events. Among the regular members of their social circle were friends from high school, including one of Lacey's few friends, Tansy. Tansy was known as a party girl, which made her hesitant to make friendships. She was also involved in distributing illegal substances and loved to throw parties wherever she went. Tansy had a large circle of friends and acquaintances, also from the same town, Michelle Kitterman. She was born on May 12, 1983, alongside her twin sister, Danielle Kitterman. They was born into a loving family and initially lived in Richland, Washington. The sisters shared a very close relationship, and they also had an older sister named Melinda. Despite being born prematurely, the twins grew up healthy in Benton City, Washington, after moving there due to their father's work. Michelle was an energetic, independent girl who wanted to explore the world and build a career. While not particularly interested in family, she was open to having children. Seeking a better life, Michelle moved to Virginia and lived in Maryland for some time. This was during her work in the modeling industry, as her looks were noticed during her senior year in high school. She occasionally received good photography offers. However, everything changed on May 23, 2003, when Michelle, then 20 years old, found herself in a difficult situation. The boy she was seeing abandoned her when he learned she was pregnant. In 2008, the Kitterman family faced their first shock when the twins' father passed away after a long illness. By October of that year, Michelle decided to move back closer to her family. She had always participated in shows, performed in groups, and loved the stage, but what amazed everyone the most was her beauty. Her modeling career was gaining momentum, and many believed she had a bright future ahead, until Michelle got pregnant. Initially, she planned to continue with her modeling career, but now her priorities shifted. She wanted to be a good mother. To stay afloat, Michelle began working part-time in various fields, such as being a waitress or a bartender. It was a tough period, but she eventually secured a job as an administrator at a local private clinic. Michelle was described as a very hard-working, kind mother, remained young, easy going, and lively. In November 2008, Tansy and Michelle attended a big city party where Michelle caught Danny Pavick's attention. They talked all evening and found it hard to stop. By the end of the night, both realized they were in love with each other. They began to meet secretly despite Danny's marriage to Lacey. He would tell his wife that he was out with friends or working late, but in reality, he was with Michelle. He spent time with Lacey while at home, often stayed late after work, walking until late with friends. He had a wide circle of friends, and Lacey did not suspect that her husband could have an affair, as she trusted him completely. One day, a friend visited Lacey, hoping to catch her at home without Danny. She disclosed Danny's betrayal, which was a real blow for Lacey. However, she composed herself, understanding the small town dynamics and how well known their family was, amidst numerous rumors. Lacey expected that this was just another piece of gossip, but days later, Danny confessed. He revealed that he was torn in a love triangle and couldn't choose between the two women. He decided that revealing his secret relationship to his wife would help him break free from the emotional turmoil. Danny admitted that he had been seeing his mistress for several months. And shortly before these events, Michelle became pregnant, which added to the confusion. He shared every detail, including how he met Michelle at the party. He claimed that Tansy introduced them and was the catalyst for his subsequent betrayals. Obviously, he sought to absolve himself of responsibility for his infidelity. After his confession, Lacey threatened to divorce him if he didn't leave his mistress. However, during this time, Michelle was doing the same. She saw Danny as an excellent candidate for a husband and father for her child. Furthermore, Michelle hoped that this new relationship would help her achieve a stable life, which she felt was necessary for her happiness. Although rumors suggested that Danny did not work and lived off his wife, he found himself in a very difficult situation. Lacey demanded that he make a choice, but for Danny, this was a big problem since he liked both women. He had to decide whether to continue living in a marriage with his wealthy wife and children or to leave for his beautiful young mistress. Several days passed during which he shared his internal conflict with friends, claiming that he had decided to leave his family and was going to tell his wife. Lacey was desperate not to lose her beloved husband and was willing to do whatever it took to keep him. On March 1, 2009, a woman contacted the police station of a neighboring city, reporting that she had found the body of a girl who was covered in blood. When the police arrived, they found the deceased in terrible condition on a deserted road in a remote area of the city. The girl was half naked, lying on her jacket, and covered in blood. Her hair was tangled in the barbed wire of a fence along the road. Initially, the cause of death was unclear. Detectives believed that the girl could have gotten lost, was frozen and disoriented due to hypothermia. She might have fallen onto the barbed wire. The police suspected intoxication or the use of illegal substances, but subsequent toxicological examinations did not confirm these suspicions. Further analysis revealed that she was a victim of murder. The unidentified body showed no signs of life and had extensive injuries. The forensic expert counted 39 stab wounds that were unusually shaped, clearly not inflicted by a simple kitchen knife. The victim received deep stab wounds from a weapon resembling an ice pick. These peculiar wounds were concentrated in the neck and abdomen areas, with a large amount of blood around the body, indicating that the victim had put up significant resistance. Identifying the body proved difficult since documents were not found with her. Witnesses insisted that the girl was not a local resident. The only valuable clue was a tattoo on the deceased's body. The police photographed the tattoo and began checking missing persons reports from nearby cities. One of the first cases that caught the detectives' attention was a report from Michelle Kitterman's mother. When shown a photograph of the tattoo, she immediately recognized her daughter, making it evident that the deceased was Michelle, who was in the early weeks of her pregnancy. Condition of the body indicating a personal motive from the killer, possibly jealousy, revenge, or insult. The nature of the injuries suggested that they were likely inflicted by more than one person. The investigators concluded that the crime had likely been committed by a group. Consequently, the police began to investigate Michelle's immediate social circle to understand who could have perpetrated this brutal attack. In their inquiries, they spoke extensively with Michelle's loved ones. Tracy, in particular, mentioned Danny Pavek when asked about Michelle's complicated relationships. She was aware of the love triangle in which Michelle found herself and knew about her daughter's pregnancy. Michelle had expressed her desire to keep the baby and to pursue a life with Danny, aiming to take him away from Lacey, who he had been seen on the side for several months. Despite the fact that he had the same motive for the murder, wanting to get rid of the annoying mistress and save his marriage with a wealthy wife, this version of events needed to be checked. The investigators first went to the house where he lived with his wife and children. Contrary to expectations, Danny had an alibi during the attack. He was at home with his wife. Lacey was also questioned. She was at home when the police arrived, behaved very calmly, and admitted that she knew about her husband's affair and that his mistress was pregnant. Lacey did not hide her distress over these facts but insisted that they were working on their marriage and trying to save it, that she had nothing to do with Michelle's murder. The detectives didn't notice anything suspicious, so they were forced to leave empty-handed. The police continued their investigation, needing to talk to a dozen more people from the deceased's closest circle of friends. 2 days later, Lacey called the station and admitted that she had a theory about who could be guilty of this bloody massacre. She referred to Tansy. According to Lacey, Michelle had been planning to report Tansy to the police for selling illegal substances for a long time. Lacey believed that Michelle was a police informant, giving Tansy a good reason to get rid of her. However, she could not provide any confirmation of this. This information needed to be checked. Before the police had time to investigate Lacey's claims, another call came into the station. A young man contacted them, saying that he had information for the police but would only share it if he was provided protection. He was seriously afraid for his life because the killers were dangerous people and would inevitably take revenge upon learning what he was going to do. The caller knew that not long ago, a girl had been beaten to death with an ice pick. Since no information about the murder weapon had been published, it was obvious that this was a valuable witness. The informant also referred to Tansy Mathis, mentioning that she sold banned substance and had repeatedly hired people if she faced any problems with her business. This allowed her to collect debts and remove unwanted competitors. The caller knew this well because he had once worked part-time as her personal security guard. However, he assured them that he was not involved in the attack, but he knew who they should investigate closely. According to him, Tansy had hired another individual known in criminal circles as Hollywood, who was supposed to deal with Michelle. The informant indicated that the ice pick had not been randomly chosen, it was provided by a man named David Richards. Of all the names mentioned, the detectives were most interested in Hollywood. After checking the databases, the police managed to locate a man named Brent Phillips, known as Hollywood. The alleged mastermind was arrested first. Brent was found in a rehabilitation center, where he was apparently seeking refuge from police persecution. He denied any wrongdoing, claiming to have had no idea about his actions and expressed that they had no serious motive to deal so cruelly with a pregnant young woman. Nevertheless, it was evident that Tansy was clearly lying because she knew Michelle. It seemed that the police had seasoned criminals in their hands who would not be easy to crack. Yet, contrary to expectations, just 4 days after the arrest, the alleged killer agreed to cooperate with the police. The reason for this, he claimed, was that he did not have enough money after the murder. The suspicions were confirmed. He had indeed participated in the massacre, but he had never been paid for the crime. After violating the terms of his agreement, he decided to cooperate and turn in the mastermind, hoping to receive leniency during sentencing. Brent said that he knew in advance what Tansy intended to do because she might not be able to manage on her own. Therefore, a strong accomplice was necessary. Tansy had convinced several more people in advance, telling them the story that Michelle wanted to cooperate with the police and would hand over the gang. On the evening of Michelle's murder, Tansy, David Richards, and Brent came for their victim, inviting her to go out for a supposedly fun night at a casino. Michelle, who knew these people well, readily agreed, falling into their trap. The group headed towards the gambling establishment, choosing a deserted road outside the city. Instead of going to the casino, however, they drove 50 kilometers away from the city and suddenly pulled over, suggesting that Michelle stop to smoke. She agreed, but after they stopped, they dragged her out into the snow and began to beat her with an ice pick. The first few blows to the stomach were made by Tansy, then she handed the ice pick to Brent because the tool was too heavy for her. Brent himself inflicted many more wounds on the defenseless Michelle. The overall story seemed plausible, but the investigators were still interested in confirming the details. Why was Tansy so angry at her old friend and her unborn child? The first blows of the killer were not made by chance, they were precisely aimed at the stomach, yet Tansy stubbornly remained silent. Analyzing the words of the murderer, the detectives quickly realized that the car in which the company was traveling that evening did not belong to any of them. Everyone had other cars. The brand was identified, indicating that the transport for this trip was rented, but they did not know from whom exactly. The detectives began to investigate the car and managed to find a receipt for the rental. The managers showed the recordings from the surveillance cameras, which indicated that Lacey rented the car in her own name. In addition, she worked there, so she was unmistakably recognized. This made her the main suspect as the jealous wife seeking retribution. Rumors reached the investigators that Lacey had repeatedly spoken unflatteringly about Michelle. She stated how she wished her husband's mistress would disappear along with the child. Naturally, she had the most compelling motive for committing the crime, but it was not possible to connect the daughter of an influential family with the bloody massacre, at least until investigators found her at the car dealership. So, Lacey added to list of potential suspects. Curiously, bail amounts of $1 million were set for the other detainees, which no one could pay, while only $250,000 was set for Lacey. Everyone thought this was connected to her powerful family, which especially outraged the victim's family. This decision was a real shock. Michelle's mother and sisters thought that this could be a conspiracy and that they were all in danger. Trials against each of the criminals began, starting with Brent's hearing on charges of first-degree murder of Michelle and first-degree assault on her unborn baby. Phillips was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to 26 years in prison. At the trial, Brent admitted that Tansy turned him against Michelle by telling him that Michelle will report him to the police because he is involved in banned substance trafficking. A similar situation occurred with a third accomplice. The lie worked with all of this. Tansy was found guilty of first-degree murder and first-degree manslaughter due to the fact that the unborn child died. It was believed that she inflicted the deepest blows with an ice pick that injured the baby. In addition, she was charged with first-degree kidnapping and concealment of material evidence. The punishment chosen was life imprisonment without the right to parole. Furthermore, for all the crimes committed, Tansy received additional sentences under other charges, totaling 19 years. Tansy admitted that she had committed the crime at Lacey's request, while her accomplice David Richards, who provided assistance, received 17 years in prison for complicity in the murder. All these hearings went fairly quickly, but Lacey's case stalled from the very beginning. The lawyer insisted that she did not want to kill anyone, but only intended to intimidate the homewrecker. The murder occurred because the criminals could not control the situation. She continued to claim that it was Tansy who initiated the attack because Michelle planned to report her illicit activities to the police. Lacey removed all responsibility from herself, denying any connection to the criminal acts. Lacey's defense immediately went to work and repeatedly delayed the hearings, prolonging the defendant's freedom. This made the situation even more tense because Lacey had rented a car. What rich woman would rent a car for? All this raised serious doubts. Recordings of telephone conversations between the participants in the conspiracy were analyzed, confirming that Lacey and Tansy called each other many times on the night of the crime. This clearly did not happen by coincidence. Additionally, even during her initial communication with the police, Lacey openly expressed her dislike for Michelle and stated that she wanted her mistress to disappear from their lives forever. Interestingly, when the detectives decided to talk to Lacey's husband, Danny, who started this love triangle, it turned out that he was on the run. This went on for about a week, leading to an arrest warrant being issued for him. It was believed that he was also an accomplice in the conspiracy. At the time of his arrest, Danny Pavek was unemployed. While on the run, he got by with odd jobs. Despite plans to leave Lacey, his alleged complicity was never confirmed by the Supreme Court, which made the case quite confusing. Only a year and a half after Michelle's death, the trial of Lacey began on November 10, 2010. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict against Tansy Mathis. She is charged with aggravated first-degree murder of Michelle Kitterman and first-degree manslaughter for killing Michelle's unborn child. In December 2010, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The very next day after the verdict was passed, Lacey filed an appeal, insisting that the prosecution was biased, her privacy was violated during the collection of evidence, and she pointed out other inconsistencies and violations, none of which were confirmed or were insignificant in light of the crime committed. Her last appeal was rejected in June 2012. Lacey remains behind bars at the Washington Correctional Center for Women. Tansy, David, and Brent are also still in the correctional facility. They will be eligible for parole in 2041. Lacey's mother wrote a book detailing her misadventures connected with her daughter's life imprisonment. However, this book did not achieve much popularity. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Marty Hill. Marty Hill, 42, lives in a cozy little town called Prairie Village, Kansas, USA. She is energetic, cheerful, and kind. From a young age, she was drawn to fine art, dreaming of becoming an artist or designer. To pursue this dream, she worked hard, completed her studies, and gained the necessary educational background. Eventually, she fulfilled her dream by working in the design studio of a clothing company. At the company, Marty is always highly regarded for his outstanding achievements and reliability. So, when she failed to show up for work on September 8, 2010, without any notice, everyone immediately suspected that something was wrong. No one knew what had happened, and she had not requested any leave. Initially, her colleagues hoped she might just be running late. They tried calling her but received no response and decided to wait a little longer. An important meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., and Marty's attendance was deemed essential. Her absence worried everyone since she was always responsible and fully aware of the meeting's importance. She is usually deeply involved with the group and consistently reports any issues, so her silence in this case is unusual. Growing increasingly uneasy, one of her friends tried calling her repeatedly, but the calls went unanswered. Overcome with fear, the friend began to break down in tears, sensing deep in her heart that something terrible might have happened to Marty. A friend decided to find out what had happened to Marty. One of her colleagues offered to visit her house and check on her. He arrived at her quiet residential neighborhood at 11:30 a.m. and knocked on her door, but there was no answer. This seemed odd, especially since her car was parked in the driveway, suggesting she should have been home. He walked around the house but saw nothing unusual, although he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The unsettling silence made him uneasy, so he returned to his car. The colleague returned to the office and discussed the situation with the others. They decided it was necessary to call the police to check on Marty. Because Marty had a 15-year-old daughter who was at school at the time, they agreed not to alarm her until they obtained more information about Marty's whereabouts. Eventually, the police were contacted, and the colleague stayed near Marty's driveway, waiting for the police to arrive. The police arrived at the scene within minutes. When the officer knocked on the door, there was no response, and there were no signs of forced entry. Looking through a window, he noticed a woman's purse sitting on the kitchen table, which indicated that Marty should have been inside. Concerned, the officer decided to check the door, suspecting she might be unwell and in need of help. To his surprise, the door was unlocked. The officer entered the house and searched the first and second floors but found nothing out of the ordinary. He then proceeded to check the basement. Using a flashlight, the officer realized there were no lights in the basement. As he descended to the very bottom, he spotted someone lying in a large pool of blood, curled up in a fetal position. The dim light revealed a gruesome scene. The room was splattered with so much blood that it resembled a torture chamber. At first, the police thought the victim was a man due to the large amount of blood, but upon closer inspection, they couldn't even determine the victim's gender. Based on the scene, they concluded that the person was dead. However, to their horror, the victim suddenly turned around and looked directly at them. The police discovered a severe wound on the victim's throat and observed that her face was so swollen, disfigured it resembled a gruesome, bloody mess. Believing the victim was on the verge of death, an officer leaned in and repeatedly asked, "Who did this?" Despite his efforts, the victim struggled to breathe and was unable to speak. Prior to questioning, the officer had already called for medical assistance. Though still alive, the victim was unable to reveal the identity of her attacker. The victim was rushed to the nearest hospital due to her critical condition, which made identifying her difficult. Her injuries were concentrated on her head and face, including multiple skull fractures, facial fractures, a concussion, and cerebral swelling. The wound was particularly devastating, slicing through muscles and vital blood vessels. Medical experts estimated her chances of survival at no more than 20%. Finally, the victim was identified to be Marty Hill, the owner of the home. Against all odds, the doctors managed to save her life. Attention immediately turned to her teenage daughter, Mackenzie, who was contacted right away. Mackenzie was in complete shock and had no idea what had transpired at their home. Upon hearing of the brutal attack, family members rushed to the hospital to be with Marty. The extent of her suffering was unimaginable, and her injuries were so severe that even her own mother didn't recognize her. Unfortunately, the doctors all gave the same grim prognosis regarding her chances of survival. Her condition was serious, but at least it was somewhat manageable. Family members took turns staying by her bedside every day. The situation was so overwhelming that they felt a mix of anger and helplessness. Her son, Stephen, felt the most anger. Living in Texas at the time, he returned home to be with his mother and offer his support. Stephen was the first person to enter the basement where his mother had been found. After the forensic investigator examined the house, they emerged from the basement and strictly prohibited anyone else from entering due to the gruesome nature of the scene. While the relatives grieved, Stephen cleaned up the blood himself. Detectives investigating the tragedy were baffled, unable to determine who could have committed such an act or why. Marty's family and friends were equally perplexed, as no one could imagine her having an enemy capable of such violence. Investigators searched for clues in her personal life, workplace, and relationships with her children but found nothing unusual. The crime was determined to be unrelated to abuse, as Marty's clothes remained intact, a conclusion later confirmed by the Armed Forces analysis. There was no indication of theft, nothing was missing, and the house showed no signs of forced entry. The circumstances of the crime were shrouded in mystery. Even Marty herself was unable to provide any information about the identity of her attacker. The police interviewed Marty's neighbors, but none of them were able to provide any significant information. The only clue reported was a sighting of a red, broken pickup truck near Marty's house at around 8 a.m., driven by a young, light-skinned, short man. This timing aligned with the approximate time of the attack determined by detectives. The officers followed up by visiting the sewing company where Marty worked to interview her colleagues, hoping to identify someone matching the description of the driver. However, this lead turned into another dead end, as none of her co-workers could offer useful information or suggest who might have been driving the pickup truck. Detectives then shifted their focus to Marty's family. They spoke with Marty's mother, Shirley Roth, who provided a potentially valuable lead. Shirley revealed that her daughter had not been romantically involved with anyone since divorcing her ex-husband 7 years earlier. Despite their divorce, they maintained regular contact because they shared custody of their daughter. Shirley explained that, following the divorce, Marty had dedicated herself entirely to her work and children and had shown no interest in dating. In Shirley's opinion, the only person who seemed like a potential suspect was Marty's ex-husband. This lead warranted further investigation, especially since Marty remained unconscious and unable to provide information herself. Detectives continued to speak with family members to identify Marty's ex-husband. Their children were quick to defend their father. Their daughter, Mackenzie, a high school student, took offense at the suggestion that her father could be a suspect. She asserted that her father could not have done such a thing, describing him as calm, non-confrontational, and someone who maintained a good relationship with his ex-wife and children. Their son, Stephen, also rejected the suspicion, stating that his father was incapable of committing the crime. Despite this, detectives could not dismiss the theory and decided to investigate it thoroughly. The police then visited Marty's ex-husband at his home. He was fully cooperative, invited them inside, and answered their questions openly. He appeared deeply affected by the incident, expressing that he still cared for Marty and was distressed by what had happened. He expressed relief that she had survived and shared that he was praying for her recovery. Although there was nothing initially suspicious, the police still needed to verify his alibi. He told them that, on the morning of the attack, he had taken his daughter to school before going to work. To confirm his statement, the police spoke with his daughter, Mackenzie, who was living with her grandmother, while they worked on verifying the details he had provided. A DNA sample was taken from him, though analysis would require time. For Mackenzie, the prohibition against seeing her father created additional hardship, making this a challenging period for everyone involved. The police also collected DNA samples from under Marty's nails, along with hair follicles found on her clothing. After comparing this evidence with the ex-husband's DNA, all suspicions about him were completely dismissed. His DNA did not match, and his alibi was verified. As a result, the ex-husband was officially cleared from the list of suspects, much to Mackenzie's relief. The family was finally able to reconnect and support one another as they waited for Marty to regain consciousness. Meanwhile, Marty's family tried to piece together what had happened and figure out who might have attacked her. Her mother, Shirley, recalled that not long before the incident, the grandmother's house had been broken into and robbed. This raised fears that the entire family could be targeted by a stalker intent on carrying out violent acts. However, the police had no definite answers, leaving the family engulfed in fear and paranoia. They had no clue who the perpetrator could be and clung to hope that Marty would recover and reveal what had truly happened. The family also recalled that, shortly before the attack, a handyman had visited Marty's house to change the locks. This handyman worked for B&J Construction, a company her mother and grandmother had trusted and hired for years. Coincidentally, he was the only unfamiliar person who had interacted with Marty in recent months. This raised suspicions that the handyman, who often did repair work for the family, might be connected to both the robbery and the assault. The police turned their attention to Brian Pennington, the handyman who had regularly visited Marty's house, her mother's house, and her grandmother's house to handle household repairs and maintenance. At the time, Brian was 26 years old, married, and the father of 2 children. He lived about an hour and a half away in a small town called Leeton, Missouri, with a population of around 500. On September 10, 2010, detectives decided to visit Brian's home. When they arrived, they immediately noticed a broken red pickup truck in the driveway, which matched a description provided by neighbors of a suspicious vehicle. However, the truck did not have license plates, so they were unable to confirm the match. Inside the house, they found Brian, who was cooperative and permitted the officers to enter his kitchen. He answered their questions openly. When asked about the truck, Brian explained that he didn't drive it because it had no license plates. He also mentioned that his last visit to Marty's house had been 3 to 4 days before the attack, during which he had checked the basement equipment. Brian didn't contact the police after seeing on the news that Marty had been attacked. He explained that he didn't know anything and couldn't provide any useful information about the case. Brian wasn't very familiar with Marty. Their interactions had been limited to working together on repairing her house. Although he considered her a respectable woman, that was all he could share with the authorities. However, detectives began to question his account. Their suspicions were triggered by the fresh scratches on his face, which might have been caused during a confrontation with Marty. When asked about these marks, he explained that they were caused by a dog that had scratched him while he was playing in the yard the day before the detectives came to visit. He acted fearful when accused of being involved in the crime, insisting that he was incapable of such an act. Brian provided an alibi, prompting investigators to verify his story. When detectives spoke to Brian's wife, Jessica, they noticed her odd behavior from the outset. She appeared hesitant, seemed afraid to disclose the truth, dodged direct questions, and mentioned there had been tension in their relationship lately. Jessica stated that her husband had been at home that morning, sleeping in another room, and added that the last time he had worked at Marty's house was about a month earlier. She also corroborated Brian's claim that the scratches on his face were caused by a dog. However, her demeanor suggested she was not being truthful. Detectives doubted her account, and she was taken to the station for further questioning. Authorities suspected Jessica might either be an accomplice to the crime or trying to shield the killer. Before leaving Brian's house, the police asked him whether they would find anything suspicious if they searched the property. Brian confidently stated that they wouldn't find anything and even agreed to let them look around. However, in the laundry basket, at the very bottom, they discovered a pair of jeans with suspicious stains. Brian explained that the stains weren't blood but merely machine oil left over from working on a pickup truck. He allowed the police to take the jeans for testing and voluntarily provided his DNA samples for comparison. The items were immediately sent to the forensic lab, where tests confirmed the stains were blood, not oil. However, additional time was needed to extract a DNA profile and compare it. While detectives awaited the test results, Marty regained consciousness in the hospital 12 days after the attack. Although she was able to communicate shortly thereafter, her initial days out of unconsciousness were clouded by confusion. During this time, she experienced constant pain and discomfort. It's not surprising that Marty needed to take a large number of medications during her recovery. Her poor health may have stemmed from her reliance on these drugs, in addition to the severe injuries she suffered. Despite the extensive brain damage she endured, her memory remained largely intact. Marty informed the police that Brian Pennington was the one who had attacked her. She described that morning's incident as starting entirely normally. She woke up early, got ready for work, and followed her usual routine. Around 7:30 a.m., she heard a car stop in front of her house but didn't pay it much attention. Soon after, there was a knock at the door. It was Brian, who had worked on her house about a month earlier. Marty found his visit odd from the beginning. It was unplanned and too early in the morning. However, she reassured herself, thinking he might have been working nearby or had forgotten a tool during his last visit. Although she was hesitant to open the door, she ultimately decided to do so. The two had a brief conversation. Brian was polite and friendly, which helped ease her concerns. Brian explained that he had heard Marty was planning to sell her house and wanted to alert her to a problem he had noticed during the previous renovation. He insisted it was important and offered to show her the issue in the basement. Curiosity overcame her, and she agreed to follow him downstairs. She recounted that everything happened very quickly. Initially, they were just walking downstairs, but an unsettling feeling suddenly came over her. Brian grabbed her and pushed her down the stairs, causing her head to hit hard against the concrete floor. Brian violently attacked Marty, choking her until she lost consciousness. Later, Marty explained that her memories of the incident were hazy, as though she were trapped in a fog. She occasionally regained consciousness, only to lose it again shortly afterward. Eventually, a policeman arrived at her home, and she was taken to the hospital. Investigators needed evidence to support Marty's account. Tests were conducted on a pair of jeans found in Brian's laundry basket, which revealed traces of Marty's blood. DNA samples taken from beneath her fingernails also matched his DNA. Law enforcement officers obtained an arrest warrant for Brian and visited his home, but he was not there. The search for him intensified, and soon police in the city discovered a damaged red pickup truck. Jessica was behind the wheel, and Brian was sitting in the passenger seat, visibly disheveled. Authorities charged Brian with attempted murder and robbery, setting bail at $1 million. The news stunned Marty's mother and grandmother, who had been in contact with Brian for years and trusted him as a professional handyman. Brian frequently worked for Marty's family, completing various household repairs. Tragically, it was Marty's mother who had recommended him to her daughter, leaving her with a deep sense of guilt. The family struggled to comprehend this senseless act of aggression. Brian's cruelty seemed inexplicable, and no clear motive emerged. Although he provided no explanation for his actions, experts were left baffled by the sheer brutality of the attack. Doctors were amazed that Marty had survived at all. Brian's violence extended far beyond simply choking Marty into unconsciousness. He threw her down a staircase, causing her to land headfirst on a concrete floor, fracturing her skull. He continued his attack relentlessly, beating her and slashing her throat. Marty struggled to comprehend what she could have done to warrant such a terrible fate. After sustaining severe head injuries, she faced challenges with her balance, although she eventually managed to walk independently. Shortly after emerging from a coma, she developed visual impairments, along with hearing and cognitive difficulties. Her family noticed that Marty seemed like a shadow of her former self, but they remained hopeful for her recovery. At times, she would lapse into long periods of thoughtfulness, which deeply concerned her loved ones, especially her daughter. Doctors refrained from making a definitive prognosis. While acknowledging the challenges Marty faced, they emphasized that her survival against the odds suggested that recovery was possible. After spending about a month in the hospital, Marty was finally discharged. During her recovery period, she became closer to her 16-year-old daughter, Mackenzie, whose birthday occurred while she was still in the hospital. Mackenzie was deeply touched by a card her mother wrote for her, even though the handwriting resembled that of a child. She recognized the long journey ahead and understood her vital role in supporting her mother as she gradually healed. Marty faced significant emotional challenges after the attack, struggling to reconcile how someone she had trusted deeply could turn out to be a vicious criminal capable of unprovoked violence. Seeking solace, she turned to her local church for emotional support. Meanwhile, Marty's family was determined to ensure that Brian faced justice and received a lengthy prison sentence. The prosecutor's office had overwhelming evidence to press charges against him, including physical proof, Marty's detailed account of the attack, scratches on Brian's face, DNA matches, and items stained with blood. The only missing piece was a clear motive. Brian had neither attempted to abuse Marty nor stolen anything from her home. His actions were simply a deliberate and calculated effort to kill her while working in her house. This act of violence was sudden and seemed to lack any apparent provocation. Marty had no prior conflicts with Brian, and relations between him and other women in her family had been peaceful. However, as police investigated Brian's background, they uncovered a troubling history of criminal activity. He had been convicted in 26 separate cases, most of which were related to domestic violence. His ex-wife and former girlfriends had reported him to the police numerous times. Jessica admitted that she had shielded him out of fear of becoming his next target, as his behavior was systematically abusive. Brian frequently threatened her, exhibiting a clear pattern of cruelty. Jessica testified for the prosecution during the trial, stating that Brian was not home on the night of the attack. She explained that he had been away for hours and only returned around noon, after Marty was assaulted. Upon his return, his clothes were covered in blood. When questioned, he claimed it was machine oil but offered no further explanation. Jessica also refuted his claim that the scratches were allegedly caused by the dog, revealing that he had forced her to lie under the threat of being killed. She provided detailed accounts of their married life, describing him as abusive, both physically and emotionally. During the trial, Brian was visibly shocked when Marty appeared alive in court to testify against him. Jessica, his wife, also testified for the prosecution, presenting evidence that contradicted his statements. Moreover, none of Brian's claims were corroborated during the hearings. Jessica submitted cell phone records showing that, at approximately 8 a.m. on the morning of the attack, she had tried to contact Brian. Geolocation data confirmed that he was near Marty's house at the time. As the evidence against Brian continues to build, he has no viable path to acquittal. To avoid a prolonged and traumatic trial, Brian was offered a plea bargain. Although he could have faced up to 40 years in prison, the deal reduced his sentence to 28 years. However, on the day his sentence was to be announced, Brian unexpectedly attempted to withdraw the plea agreement and plead guilty instead. The court rejected his request, citing no valid justification for accepting it. During the final courtroom proceedings, Marty directly asked Brian why he had attacked her and nearly killed her, but he refused to provide a reason or make any closing statements. Marty is still recovering from the devastating attack, which left permanent scars on her face and neck. The injuries have distorted her facial features and affected her mobility. Despite these challenges, Marty remains determined and continues to train rigorously, believing she can regain her former self or even surpass it. In interviews, she often reflects on how someone only 26 years old could commit such a cruel act. Her resilience and self-belief have helped her heal from this violent incident, strengthening her resolve in the process. Marty returned to her routine fairly quickly and has become even more active. She took up kickboxing to learn self-defense, and sports have played a significant role in her recovery. She also created a website aimed at supporting others who have experienced traumatic events, using her personal story to inspire and encourage healing. In addition to these efforts, Marty continues to work as a designer for a clothing company, channeling her creativity into her art as a way to manage anxiety and stress. She credits her daughter, Mackenzie, as the cornerstone of her recovery and is deeply grateful for her unwavering support. Recently, Marty published a book that details the horrific incident that changed her life, with the hope of inspiring others to overcome adversity through resilience. She now actively works as a motivational speaker, meeting with various communities and offering the same support that helped her rebuild her life. As for Brian Pennington, her attacker, he remains in prison and is estranged from his family, including his mother, ex-wife, and children, who have all cut ties with him.